Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Community Redevelopment Agency. The time is now 8:20. The date is February 26, 2020. Ms. Johnson, do you want to lead us off, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, good morning, members of the board. This special meeting of the Community Development Agency is for the board to conduct interviews of the 5 finalists for the position of CRA Executive Director. As your backup indicates, this position will be an in-house position reporting directly to the CRA board. For the record, I would like to put the process into the record. The applications were screened on the 18th of February. The 5 finalists were selected. The resumes and backup for those candidates were distributed to the CRA board on the 19th. And then on the 25th, we had 2 meet and greet events for the public. And here you are today with the interviews and selection of the CRA director. I will be assisting and facilitating the process as well as the HR director, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm going to call him up to walk the board through how the interview process will be conducted.
All right, before we do that, let me just ask for the record, we don't have any cards from any public for non-agenda items. Okay, very good, thank you.
Good morning, board members. Jose Luis Rodriguez, Chief Human Resources Officer. The process, as you know, is going to be a public interview where you, as the CRA board, will have the opportunity to ask questions and interview the 5 candidates that are scheduled today. The candidates will be called up one at a time for a 45-minute interview window. And the other candidates will be waiting in the other room until they are called in order to ensure fairness and efficiency in the process. In front of you, you have a folder that has the 12 questions that are to be asked of all the candidates. It is at the preference of the board whether you want to ask both your questions at once as the chair recognizes you, or whether you want to go through one round of questions and then go back for a second round of questions to ask your second question, but it works out to about 2 questions per board member. You do have the opportunity, as always, as the board, to ask follow-up questions, and it's the same process that you would follow for any other agenda item. That once you're recognized, you can ask any follow-up questions that you have. Once you are done with the 12 preset questions, whatever other time you feel you need, is allotted so that you can ask any follow-up questions, any other questions that haven't been asked related to the candidate's job experience and qualifications. And it's also an opportunity for the candidate who may have a follow-up question for you or may want to make a follow-up comment regarding their qualifications that they weren't able to get through in the interview process. So that allotment of time should carry you to about 12:55 or 1 o'clock. At your option, we do have a break built in from 1 to 2 o'clock for lunch, but it's your preference as the board whether you want to just, after you interview all the candidates, whether you want to just go right through or whether you want to take that break and then reconvene at 2 o'clock. The second half of the meeting will be an open public discussion amongst the CRA board on the candidates, their qualifications, and their preference for selection of a candidate. And once you select a candidate, the second decision point will be to agree as a board on what salary you will direct the Human Resources Department to offer the selected candidate.
Okay, will the candidates make like an opening statement prior to questioning, or we're diving right into questions?
That is at the preference of the board, whether you want them to make an opening statement on their qualifications or whether you're already comfortable enough based on the resumes that you've reviewed to just go straight into the first question.
Board members, what do you think?
Oh, that's fine.
Commissioner?
I'd like an opening.
And Ms. Johnson also has some background information on all the candidates that she's also going to share with you, and that may help facilitate.
Okay, but let me get an answer to this question first.
No, I had another question. So,
Okay,
yeah.
let's deal with the opening statement question. How do you?
I don't need one.
You don't need one?
No. I mean,
Mr. Show? Don't need one? You look very thrilled. Okay, okay.
I have a I have a clarification question
Okay.
relating to that. So are the only questions we're allowed to ask are the questions on this? Okay.
No, those are the standard questions. The board can ask follow-up questions, and at the end of the process, if there are questions that you want to ask related directly to their experience or questions related directly to the CRA district, you will be able to ask those questions as well.
I'm not sure that that answered my question. We have to ask these questions first?
Yes, yes, we have to have standard questions that all of the candidates get asked, and
so
those are the
only
standard
if-
questions.
Only if there's time, then we can ask follow-up questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Neri?
Thank you, Mayor. Could you just remind me again, you had mentioned the board setting the salary. Where was that taking place? And that was the last item?
During the second half of the meeting, the two decision points will be a selection of a candidate that you want to offer the position to.
Okay.
And then as part of that discussion, after you've selected the candidate, or in conjunction with that, would be what salary the board is comfortable with recommending that HR
Okay.
offer. And in your folders, there is a sheet of paper that shows the salary range for the position, and we did receive the board had previously asked for some comparisons. We did put a request out to multiple CRAs. We've only received 4 responses as of yesterday, but those 4 responses with those salaries are in your folder for some point of reference, and we're available to assist with any follow-up questions you may have on that.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Shove?
Thank you, Mayor. I know we had the public meet and greets last night. Is there a point in, maybe not this morning's meeting, but this afternoon's meeting, where the public has the opportunity to comment?
I believe we have a public comment on the agenda.
We did not dial that into the process, but that's at the board's discretion. The public comments was just set as a normal, process where you take public comments in the beginning, but again, this is the board's process.
I don't know, how do people feel? I've gotten some emails with people expressing preferences. I don't know how comfortable I feel with the public just kind of weighing in, because you can't control that. And I don't want this to necessarily be a negative about any candidate, and as positive about as possible, but I can't control that. So if somebody gets up to the mic, I don't know if they're going to be blasting someone for something or not, and I just don't want to take that risk, but that's just one opinion.
And I would agree with that.
Commissioner Shove?
I guess while I can appreciate that we have a whole calendar of process, between last night and today, it makes it very difficult to get feedback from the public. And even at this point today, it's a bit late in the process to have the public come out. So if it's the will of this board not to have public comment, I guess just for the record, I would state while going through this process, it does make it difficult to actually have received that feedback between last night and this morning. So, I think we're probably down that road at this point. And if it's the will of this board to not have comments, then that's fine. I just wanted to state that for the record.
All right, any other questions, concerns? Okay, the one thing I'm a bit, so you're expecting us to have a salary debate in the sunshine?
Well, once you select who you want as your CRA Executive Director, the next step in the process would be to negotiate. So the board has a couple of options. If you all are comfortable with a specific salary, you can give us that direction. If you are comfortable with having your HR director or your city administrator to negotiate the starting salary within that range, if we don't come to an agreement on a salary, then at some point, it's going to have to come back to the board.
Which is typical, right?
Yes.
I mean, with any other high-ranking employee.
Yes.
It's a private negotiation, and then the proposed agreement is then brought back to this board for a vote.
Yes.
But I'm not sure I'm comfortable with having that debate, the back and forth, in a public forum. So I would suggest, and this is just one vote, but I would suggest that you all, once we pick a person, you all go back, cut your deal. If you want, and if commissioners, board members, if you want to weigh in on that prior to, you could speak to the city administrator and let her know your opinions. Let them, do their magic behind closed doors, and it will have to come back to us anyway.
That is correct. Again, it's just the board's process. We're
Yeah.
simply looking for you all to give us direction on what you're comfortable with, how you want us to proceed.
Because what may be offered may not be accepted, and there may be some back and forth, and I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum for that back and forth conversation to take place. So I don't know how other people feel. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree that the most appropriate way of handling it would be for our HR department to negotiate that with the candidate, the successful candidate directly. If it has to come in front of us, or maybe we ratify the salary after it's negotiated.
Yeah, I mean, I presume that the agreement, whatever it is, would have to come to us for ratification and approval. Not even ratification, it's approval. Anybody else? Commissioner Schoaf.
I would be comfortable if we all agree as a board, take a vote, whatever, on the salary range that's been presented, have HR or Administrator Johnson, you negotiate something out, bring it back to us after it's accepted, and then ratify that salary. I think that seems like a fair process.
I concur.
I see a lot of nodding heads. So I think that's what we'll do. And when we get to that point, we'll maybe have further discussion on the range. But we'll let the nuts and bolts of the negotiations occur between you all and the successful candidate.
Thank you. That's the direction we're seeking.
Okay, anything, I know you have some else to share with us, so please proceed.
You know, actually, the next item to be shared with the board is just proceeding here. We just put up some very brief bullet points on the background of the candidates. And so as the board is conducting the interview, that
Okay.
is what will be on the screen. But you all are going to have them not to do an opening statement. We're ready to proceed with the interview
Now,
process.
the other question is, will the other candidates be allowed to sit in the room during each?
No, they will be
Okay.
across the hall.
All right, very good. Any other questions before we go dive into the interviews? Board members? Okay, let's proceed.
Okay, so the first candidate is Mr. Artie Jones. As his resume and your backup indicates, he is the Economic Development Director for the City of College Park. He has been the Economic Development Director for the City of St. Mary's, Georgia, and the Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Brunswick, Georgia.
Okay,
Mr.
before we
Jones.
begin, board members, with respect to the questioning, we'll just go down the aisle, and then we'll alternate who gets first. So, Commissioner Rawls, you go first this round, and what I would suggest is we do one question, so we can make sure everybody gets a question in, and then we'll start another round of questioning, okay? All right. So no opening statement, so Commissioner Rawls, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Good morning.
How has your background and experience prepared you to be successful in the position of Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency?
Because I've had experience, well, first of all, good morning, Board.
Is your mic on? Yeah, could you speak into it, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Board. First and foremost, I believe that my past experience working with several communities in community and economic development, and also being able to direct and administer projects from beginning to end. My extensive experience with real estate acquisitions, contract development, also my ability to be able to negotiate complex deals over my years working with the City of St. Mary's, Brunswick, and College Park, Georgia, and also being able to work with other local governments and organizations such as the Federal Aviation Administration and the City of Atlanta has well prepared me for the position of the CRA Executive Director.
Okay. Commissioner Schoaf?
Thank you. Could you describe for us your background in budget preparation and administration, specifically in short and long-term budget planning?
Okay. My experience in budget preparation spans over my entire career. I've been responsible for budget preparation on the department head level, from budgets as low as $3 million a year up to the current budget that I work with, which is approximately about $13 million per year. I have experience with capital project budgeting, and also 3 to 5 year strategic budget planning with the City of College Park and the City of Brunswick, Georgia. My responsibilities for the City of St. Mary's did not span that long. I also have a extensive experience with long-term budgeting items such as major public infrastructure and major public facilities, such as the new arena that has just been developed in the City of College Park, which is approximately $43 million. I work with a throughout my career, starting out with the City of Brunswick, my budget experience, that was my first executive director position for community and economic development. I was able to with the budget I was working with, it was approximately $3.6 million when I started working there. I was able to actually have that budget reduced down to approximately $3 million from the $3.6 million because of the way that I've budgeted. I was able to cut back in various areas. And throughout my career, I've been able to do the same for the City of Brunswick and also for the City of College Park.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, can you describe to us the most impactful redevelopment project with which you have been involved?
The most impactful project was my ability to be able to negotiate a deal to build a new arena in the City of College Park. And I was able to do that with not $1 coming from the general fund revenue, being able to work with other revenue sources and helping to negotiate deals with another local government, and being able to basically start with nothing and end up with a tremendous facility with anchor tenants that are also attracting other major tenants and events such as concerts, convocations, religious events, anything that a 5,000 seat facility can accommodate.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for joining us today. Appreciate your time yesterday as well. Can you please explain to us your experience in working with culturally and economically diverse groups and how you build consensus among stakeholders to achieve an agency goal?
Okay. With the City of Brunswick, that was a very diverse community, approximately 60% African American, about 15% Hispanic, Latino, and about 20 to 25% of, Caucasian and other within the community. Within this particular community, the strategy I had for building consensus with the community is actually going out within the community and actually approaching them where they were at that particular time. I would say that approximately 50% of the community was low to mod income. A large population, I would say approximately 65 to 70% was rental properties. Basically the community had a lot of challenges, but in spite of those challenges, in spite of the older population also, I was able to reach out to those communities from 2000 to 2006, going from, community meetings to churches to meetings with the various council people in their respective districts that they represented. I was able to set up community ad hoc committees within my department that would comprise of members of the community from those respective wards to communicate to them what was going on so that those community members could actually go back to their respective wards and communicate that information. This is well before social media and, a number of the media outlets that we have right now. So it was a lot of beating the streets, walking the pavement, making presentations at community centers and just talking with the community. So I was able to do a decent job there. Jumping over to the city of College Park, which is another very diverse community, approximately 80% African American within this community. I was able, throughout this community, reaching out through social media, making them aware of what's going on. So many times people from the community, they do not pay attention to what goes on within the city that they live. The only time they have any type of interface with the community is they might pay a water bill at City Hall, or they might pay property taxes, or they might go visit the municipal court because of a speeding ticket or a parking ticket. What I was able to do is to reach out to community members via the podcast that I host for the City of College Park, actually becoming a board member and becoming members within organizations such as the Old National Merchants Association, which is a business district in an area that's economically challenged within the City of College Park. I have also been able to reach out to the communities of the Hispanic Latino community within the City of College Park. I would say it was probably 5 to 10% one particular area of the city, but I was able to reach out to those communities also and provide bilingual options as far as putting information out there. Although I've had 2 years of Spanish in college and 2 in high school, I'm not very, I would say, proficient in speaking Spanish, but I was able to have college students that served as interns to provide, language. They were able to speak on my behalf to those various groups.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jones. Again, thank you for your interest in this position. Can you describe to us a time when a project you were managing had unforeseen budget and timeline issues, and how did you address those challenges?
That's every year. It happens very often, and it's not because of lack of planning, but of course whenever we've had any type of shortfalls, we've always had backups. One particular instance I can mention was during the recession. This is with the city of St. Mary's. During that period of time, around 2011, budgets were still being cut. Employees weren't receiving any raises, especially those city and government employees. Taxes were still, high. They did not decline at all. You had reductions in force. And due to the budget shortfalls, all departments were required to cut their budget between 5 and 10%. After cutting that budget, not receiving any raises or anything else, we found out that there was going to be a closure of a local career center, a Georgia Department of Labor career center. This career center was responsible for providing unemployment benefits to those who were unemployed, which a lot were unemployed. There was a closure of a facility in the city of St. Mary's in 2002. 2,000 people lost their jobs immediately, and there was about 1,500 contractors that also lost their jobs. It was Gilman Paper Company. They closed all of a sudden, went bankrupt. Because of that, fast forward to 2011, there was a lot going on within the city of St. Mary's. Things were constantly declining. The recession didn't help matters at all. So the Career Center was kind of that lifeline for employees, and this was a regional career center where you would have to travel about 45 miles, north to Brunswick, Georgia to actually get assistance. We could not let that career center close. I had virtually no money within my economic development budget to do anything as far as to help. So I was able to address this loss this potential loss of this career center because the secretary for the Georgia Department of Labor said that this office was going to close because they could not afford the rent. I was able to reach out to the governor and also work with the Georgia Department of Labor, the commissioner at the time, and I was able to negotiate a deal to utilize an old abandoned library within the city of St. Mary's that was not being used for anything. I worked with two other municipalities, the city of Woodbine and the city of Kingsland, Georgia, also to provide some funding assistance. I put a budget together to rehabilitate this particular building. And I was able to work with the sheriff's office to use prison labor of those guys that had the skill set to be able to rehabilitate this building, and they were able to, within a 4-month period of time, totally rehabilitate this building. We put an HVAC system in. They were able to also assist in the moving of the Georgia Department of Labor employees from the facility where they were paying $5,000 per month to a facility where they were only going to be paying $5,000 a month, to a facility that they would only be paying $1 a year. And I was able to save that particular facility and move it right beside City Hall. So with basically no money whatsoever, in a very short time frame, I was able to save a career center within the city of St. Mary's, and also those employees, their jobs. There was approximately about 12 employees that worked at this career center also.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Good morning.
Tell us about a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved. What made it politically sensitive? What was your role in the situation? And what was the outcome or result?
A politically sensitive situation that I was involved with and my role within the situation.
I can read it again.
Please.
Speaking to the mic.
Sorry, my mic isn't on. I apologize. Tell us about a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved. What made it politically sensitive? What was your role in the situation? And what was the outcome result?
Thank you for repeating the question. There's one that comes to mind, but it's a current situation, and I can't talk about that right now. But let me go back to as I was serving as the Community and Economic Development Director for the city of Brunswick, Georgia from 2000 to 2006, there was a particular project that was located, there was was 4 blocks, and all around these 4 blocks there was some shotgun homes, very bad condition. They needed to come down, needed to be raised, but there was several families that lived within those homes. Around those homes was public housing all the way around it, and it's a very I would say, economically challenged area. It was right in the middle of town. If you know anything about Brunswick, it's somewhat of a tourist area because of St. Simon's Island, Sea Island, and Jekyll Island is located there. And it came down to, the community wanted to save these homes within this particular area. Well, number one, they did not own them. They were privately owned. They were dilapidated. They possibly, I think, could have been saved, but at the same time, in my opinion, they were beyond that point. They were smaller shotgun homes, so as far as the feasibility of being able to have a family to live in those homes was not a possibility. And there was a kind of a public outcry that they did not want these homes to be torn down. And the city was at a point where it was through condemnation that we were going to be tearing them down because the owner didn't want to do anything with them. There was a number of issues, tax issues. And it was my particular department's responsibility for the redevelopment of this area and the commissioners at the time listened to my my recommendations that I felt that they should be raised, but at the same time, I felt that we also needed to have a plan for coming back with something else before, we would make that decision. I have the philosophy that you should never buy any property that you don't have plans for in the future, and you really probably shouldn't tear anything down unless you have some plans for it, unless there's kind of a life safety issue there. And with this particular buildings, there was some safety issues that kids in the area played in these homes and throughout these homes, and they could get hurt. So there was council members on both sides that did not agree one way or the other, and you can't accommodate the entire commission. You can only go from your gut instinct to make the recommendation. I did make the recommendation that these homes should be razed, should be torn down. I did not have a future plan for these homes, but I felt it was a life safety issue, so that is the direction that we moved in. They did not tear all the homes down. There were some that were able to be salvaged, but most of those homes were torn down. As a result of that, my relationship with the community, I would not say that it was a bad relationship, because the minority that came out that was against tearing the homes down, they were the minority. Most of the people within the community wanted those particular buildings raised.
Very good. Commissioner Schoaf.
Could you describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on a highly controversial community redevelopment issue that generated community and stakeholder interest at all sides?
Okay, could you repeat the question one more time?
Can you describe the process you would utilize in preparing and developing a staff recommendation on highly controversial community redevelopment issues that generate community and stakeholder interest on all sides?
Okay, I'm pretty good at processes. First and foremost, if there was a particular project area, a community redevelopment project area, as far as staff recommendation, first I would evaluate. Number one, I would find out what the issue or concern was within a particular area. In that, as I evaluated it, I would look at as far as pros, cons, and also what type of redevelopment activities was most appropriate there. I would also do a lot of due diligence, working with the community to find out what those, what would they like for the property to actually become one day. Not that we would move in that direction, but just to try to get a feeling of the spirit behind what this area once was, what should it be, and what's the highest and best use. Most of the time, sometimes the highest and best use is not necessarily what the community wants, and at the same time, you have to be able to communicate and educate the community on why certain pieces of property should not be certain types of product. But I would actually put an Excel spreadsheet together with the kind of the pros, the cons, and several options. And I would also do a lot of due diligence and getting backup information so that you would be able to have credible information that does not come from me, but actually comes from respectful sources to be able, so that the board would be able to make a decent decision in moving forward. And I would also gather together those experts to be available to be able to address those questions also.
Mr. Jones, other than relying on industry associations, for example, Florida Redevelopment Association or ICSC, how do you stay informed on cutting-edge redevelopment activities and industry trends?
Okay. Well, I'm also a part of the Urban Land Institute, ULI. They constantly have topics. There's a number of podcasts that I can actually tune in on at any given time to be able to find out the latest and the greatest with community redevelopment activities. I've also visited other communities I'm always asking my board members, city council people, even people within the community, that if they see something out there that is a great project that they think that should be duplicated within the city of College Park or whatever community I happen to work in, they would provide that information to me, and sometimes we would have field trips to actually visit those sites, talk to the developers, find out what works, what did not work, how did they do it, kind of what do they regret, if they had to do it all over again, would they do it, ask those types of questions. But in addition to that, in addition to ULI, podcasts, I just stay informed, working with a number of professionals throughout the Atlanta metro area. And I would say that was probably, firsthand, would probably be the most effective way that I'm staying abreast of what's going on, the latest and the greatest. Whenever you're in a major metropolitan area, the major cities are probably doing projects that are light years, beyond where, I guess, the projects going on in the rural areas. And that's the way that I kind of stay up to date with the latest and community redevelopment activities.
Thank you. Madam President?
Thank you. What is your most often used management style, and can you provide us some examples and explain your style?
Okay. My management style is one where it's excuse me one moment. The management style that I often use is one of where I like to listen to, I share my ideas, and this is for difficult projects. I share my ideas with my staff, and I also share my ideas with those that I respect that have institutional knowledge of those particular projects that I'm involved with. And as I receive feedback and as I do research on my own, I come up with several recommendations in which I will share those ideas also with those that are who advice I respect. And from that point, I talk to my staff and I let them know exactly how I would like for things to go and the direction that we should move into. Now, occasionally, there are staff people that might come to me with, I don't like this and that this is not the direction that I feel that we should move into. I listen to all that, I take it in, but at the end of the day, if I feel that the direction that I should move in is, the initial direction that I wanted to move into is the direction that I'm going to move into, then I'll proceed in that direction. Because at the end of the day, if something does not go right, it's going to be my responsibility. And at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm including my staff, because I like to try to surround myself with smart people. I think I mentioned to a couple of you on yesterday, if I'm in the room and I'm the smartest person, I'm probably in the wrong room. I need to make sure to have smart people around me, those that are experts, those that I can confide in and talk to projects about, to make reasonable, solid decisions. I am a risk taker, but I am a very measured risk taker in that those things which I go out for, I make sure that I am even if I do fall short, that I'm not going to, it's not going to be a major fall. It would be a minor setback, and I can move forward in another direction. Okay.
Commissioner Aaron?
Okay, thank you. We're on question 10, Mr. Jones. How do you balance the duties of the CRA Executive Director position, given that this position is a city employee reporting to the CRA board, but all the CRA staff are contractors?
Okay, that was a very interesting conversation I had on yesterday about this particular scenario, which I've never been in a scenario like that before. But the thing is that going into this position, it's not only going to be brand new for myself, it's going to be brand new for this board. I feel that the direction that the commission and the CRA board is moving in is the right position, in that this is a huge operation, $65–70 million CRA budget. A lot's going on within the city of West Palm Beach, and the thing about it is that I feel that as the elected officials and also the CRA board, it feels more comfortable if the board were to have an in-house position, a person that was accountable to the board and not necessarily to a company. I'm not discounting the current management, but at the same time, I feel that if it's a staff person, there's more accountability at the end of the day. Number two is that working with the board, I would say during the first 30, 60, 90 days, and working with the board, of course, we would make introductions. I would meet with all of them individually, talk with them. I would get to know what it is that they do, how they do it, how often do they report, find out the pros and the cons of how the operations have been in the past. And I would continue to work with them and make minor adjustments so that I would be able to grasp what was going on, move projects forward. But then I would say after my 90 days, I would come back to this board. I would come back and I would provide you with an evaluation of some adjustments that I would like to make in the short term, and then some adjustments that I would like to make in the long term also. I feel that, for me to realize success and for this CRA board to realize success, I will need a team around me that I am very, I have confidence in, and I'm not saying I don't have any confidence in working with an existing organization, but at the same time, I need confidence in the people that I'm working with, and that, they're going to provide me with the best product, the best service, and they're going to provide it real time and to the liking of the board.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Tell us about a specific time when you had to handle a tough problem, which involved ethical issues, or you felt your integrity was tested.
This probably happens to most, I guess, department heads or maybe executive directors probably a couple times per year. In my capacity serving over the years, there has been a number of, and not often, but on occasion, there has been an issue to come up within the city that I've worked for in the past and present. And they've questioned spending on some occasions. They've questioned, why were you in this particular meeting? Why were you meeting with this particular person? And it's the direction that I have as a city administrator or a department head or a CRA executive director is that you have to keep your head above the fray. You cannot be pulled into the issues, because most times they're not looking at myself directly, but they're looking at an organization trying to find issues and concerns. As I first started as a Community and Economic Development Director in 2000 for the city of Brunswick, one thing the city manager told me at that time is he said that the advice that he gave me and the advice that I used to this very same day and the advice that I provide to my staff people is, it says, don't do anything that you wouldn't mind seeing on the 6 o'clock news. And when I thought about that particular, that scenario, I said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Don't do anything that you feel that you would not be able to justify, would not be able to adequately communicate why certain things happened. So in doing that, I've always been a person to keep up with documentation, write notes within my little pad whenever I'm meeting with people, so that if anything were to come up, I'm not stuttering, I'm not confused, I'm not saying that, oh, I can't recall, but I'm able to pull up and to adequately address a question and leave it as it is. But like I said, there's no particular, like I said, right offhand, anything that I can think of that was at me personally, but most of the time it was coming at the organization as a whole. And then, of course, as an organization as a whole, you have community members that are doing open records requests, trying to find out this and that. And then if they get something, it's a snapshot of something, but it's not the complete story. And then whenever you provide the feedback of why this happened, you were able to adequately, address the issue, and it was not a concern at all.
Commissioner Riles.
Are there any ethical issues in your background that we should be aware of? Is there anything that you would like to share with us that you believe requires an explanation?
In my background as an adult, throughout my career, there's nothing ethical that I can speak of. When I was a college student, going through college, Savannah State University is where I started going to school. There was a particular issue when I was an undergraduate where I got in a little bit of trouble. During this period of time, I was it was my first time outside the house, outside my parents' home. I was in college, had a bunch of friends and everything, and then there were some individuals on campus, which I really wasn't familiar with, but whenever you go to college, everybody kind of becomes your friend. And there was a particular instance where an individual had sold me some merchandise that I didn't know was stolen. When that merchandise was actually provided to me, like I said, I didn't know or anything else what had happened, that it was stolen. It was a little itty-bitty microwave. I was off the mill playing at the time. After it was brought to my attention that it was stolen merchandise, I went through the various process, and I went to court, and I spoke about, where I got it from, and the particular guy that I had implicated. They found out that this particular guy had been breaking in a number of dorm rooms on the campus of the college where I was actually at. And because of that, I had the First Offenders Act, and it was done. It was wiped from my record. So that's the only thing, and that was actually when I was actually in college.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, board members, now we have about 11 minutes to go into any other questions that if you may have. Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you. And I wanted to take us back for just one point of clarification. When we talked about budgeting, you had indicated that you manage budgets from $3 million to $13 million annually. On your resume, it notes that you served as acting city manager to oversee about $120 million annually. So can you explain where that difference comes in?
Okay. I wasn't taking into consideration, I was thinking about my department budget, and I was not thinking about the city manager budget. Whenever I was acting city manager, acting city manager, whenever the city manager was out of town, whenever he was at meetings, he chose a department head to oversee the city while they were out of town. During those opportunities, the budget at the time was $120 million. Now the budget for that very same city is about $140 million.
Can you specify what city that was?
College Park.
Madam President.
Thank you. As much as we are interviewing you today, I hope that you are also been interviewing us in your process of determining if this is a good fit and a good move for you. So in that process, I presume that you did some research about us, the city, the CRA, our community. Can you just make a few statements about to demonstrate your knowledge of our CRA or our budgets and or our community? Just what research helped you to determine that this was a good fit for you?
Okay. The research that helped me the most was really pulling up going to your website, pulling up the CRA, the plans as far as the various CRA districts. As I looked at what you guys were doing here within the city of West Palm Beach, I saw that I had the transferable skills from the city of College Park, city of St. Mary's, and the city of Brunswick, Georgia, to be able to implement that within the city of West Palm Beach. I also was able to, Georgia redevelopment is a little bit different than Florida. In Florida, you have a lot more latitude to do different things as far as redevelopment, the utilization of the CRA funds, or TIF funds as they're called, TAD funds as they're called in the state of Georgia. In addition to researching the the particular plans. I was able to speak with a couple of individuals because I have a couple of economic development friends or colleagues that have worked in the Florida area, as well as some city managers that have actually served in communities where there are CRA districts. And I was able to speak with them, and I asked them, I said, well, I don't have experience working with CRAs, and he said, well, basically they're the same as tax allocation districts. So I said, well, do you feel that I would be a good fit for it since I work for you? You know, it was Stephen Kroll, who was actually a city manager in Florida, and I believe now he's in Illinois. He says, well, I think that you would be an excellent fit. You know, you have the skills. I feel that you can do it, and at the same time, a lot of what you already do, it's just you're doing it on a larger scale. And he said that, you know, he asked me about the community, and I said, the city of West Palm Beach. He says, oh, that's an excellent community. You know, it'll be a great place for you and your family. So I said, okay. And then I started researching schools. I started researching, you know, education, because family's a big part. I have 3 kids that will need to find decent schools to matriculate in. And then at the same time, I also wanted to find out the quality of life here. And it's a great quality of life, a very, very low crime rate in this area compared to the Atlanta metropolitan area, which is quite a bit busier. So it's researching online. I've only visited the city of West Palm Beach one time before actually coming to this interview. I was very surprised to get the call on last week that I was one of the finalists. So I was very excited, but I probably would have actually come in earlier provided I had a little more notice to be able to come and drive around and really get a feel for the community. Within your CRA districts, they are very, very different. They have very, very different characteristics. Some districts are off to the races and moving forward. Other districts are not quite there, but there's a lot that can be done within them, and they have smaller projects, and I feel that they need a lot of tender love and care. They need some additional attention, and I feel some additional resources within those particular areas, at least seeing those resources moving forward. I feel that there needs to be more citizen participation, more communication between the community and the CRA to be able to get buy-in from the citizens to help them to feel like projects are moving forward. I feel also that within these particular districts also that there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect just from what I have been exposed to. But I feel it's something that can be fixed over time. And then there are other districts that are more so historic and, high quality of life areas. I feel that all of these districts can be addressed adequately and equitably. And when I say equitably, everyone won't get the same attention, but at the same time, it will be equitable so that all of them are feel that they are receiving the attention that they need. I have worked in communities, and I'm working in the current community now where a particular part of town has not received that attention for a very, very long time. And when I started as the Economic Development Director and Executive Director over Clearly College Park within that community, they wonder why I was moving forward with projects in one particular area and not in another particular area at the same time. Why wasn't I putting the same resources in one area as opposed to another? Well, within economic development, you have to first identify those areas that are ready for the type of development, that are ready to, that I can actually convince developers to invest tens of millions of dollars to invest in an area. Those areas with the highest crime, those areas that have that are not attractive because of slum and blight and things of that nature. Those areas need certain types of attention right then and there. They need more law enforcement. They need more community activities. They need more activities for the children, to keep them in the recreation centers and not, playing outside and busting somebody's window with a baseball. But once the areas and the thriving areas are up and coming, there are going to be projects that are not able to get into those up and coming areas for one reason or another. Those particular projects you place in the Plan B areas and the Plan C areas, and you continue to develop block by block, and you form partnerships with developers. You form partnerships with the community. You work with the developers and the community. You work with the developers to provide some type of service to the community, or some type of, funds, or some type of something for the community to pay back or to give back. The CRA has invested millions and millions of dollars, and at the same time, these companies that were so gracious to be able to receive this money, they should also be reinvesting in those communities.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, Mr. Jones, I see that you definitely have relevant CRA experience, but in cities with significantly smaller populations and significantly smaller budgets, can you just briefly address your thoughts on your ability to do this job at this level?
Okay. My previous experience and even my resume for the most part, the cities that I've worked in, I kind of feel bad that they didn't have higher populations, and I feel kind of bad also that they did not have, were not of a larger size. Within those communities that I've served, and if you speak to anyone within those communities that know of the work that I've done over the years, they'll tell you that I've done 5 times as much as the last economic development director or CRA director that they have worked with before in the past. The last community that I've worked in, the city of College Park, even though it may be 11.1 square miles, even though it may only be 15,000 permanent population, it has a daytime population of about 250,000 because of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and all of the passengers, the 110 million passengers that come through on on an annual basis. Development in the city of College Park is a lot more difficult than development in any other part of the nation. And the reason that I feel that is because in most communities that you develop in, you only have to worry about roads, infrastructure, zoning for the most part. But you do not have to worry about deed-restricted property. You do not have to worry about building height limitation. You do not have to worry about planes flying overhead. You do not have to worry about noise from the airplanes. You cannot build certain types of structures within certain areas of the flight path of planes because of the noise and sometimes the pollution from those planes. So regardless of the
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm going to cut you off here because we're giving everybody the same amount of time. Thank you again for your interest and for your very thorough answers. And it's a pleasure to meet you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, are we going to get a short break between candidates to jot down our thoughts, or?
Yes, we built in a 10-minute
Okay,
window between each candidate
good.
for that
Thank
very
you.
reason.
Mayor, I have a quick question about the process.
Sure.
Would I be correct in assuming that it's going to be similar to the auditor, the external auditor position, where we'll be given a sheet where we're ranking them from 1 to 5, or are we doing it somehow differently?
What did you contemplate, Ms. Johnson?
We did not plan for you all to do a ranking, of the candidates. You all will have discussion and deliberation and then come to a consensus on who you feel is your choice. And I would encourage you to maybe do your number 1 choice and number 2 in the event that negotiations fail. We'll know who you would like us to then go to.
Commissioner?
Just that I totally agree. I was hoping that we weren't going to be doing rankings. I didn't think that I didn't want to rank 1 through 5. So I appreciate that.
Okay. We got a few minutes if you want
Yes,
to.
I'll wait for a signal from the board when you all are ready to call in the second candidate.
Let's proceed.
Okay, your next candidate is Allison Justice, and as this board is aware, she currently serves as the interim director, but officially she is the deputy director of the Community Development Agency for RMA, has previously been a project manager for Redevelopment Management Associates, as well as a senior account executive for Summit Marketing. Allison and the board, you all can proceed.
All right, we've again decided not to do opening comments, so we'll dive right into the questions. And I believe the first questioner is Commissioner Schoaf.
Good morning. How has your background and experience prepared you to be successful in this position of Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency?
Well, first of all, good morning, board members. Commissioner Schoaf, my experience is running this agency. So for the last 5 months, this is my role as interim executive director has provided me the skills, not just the last 5 months, obviously the last 6 years I've been with this agency. I've run the strategic finance plan, the budgets both in downtown and Northwood that are over $45 million for both districts together. I have run major projects within the city, including Clematis Streetscape project, as well as other infrastructure projects. We just issued $100 million worth of bonds that I am project managing many of those infrastructure projects as well. Thank you.
Ms. Justice, describe your background in budget preparation and administration, specifically in short and long-term budget planning.
Again, as I mentioned before, I have been responsible for the last 6 years in this agency for producing the 5-year strategic finance plan. It's important with that finance plan, we look 5 years ahead so we can do the budgeting. When you have outstanding bonds and debt, and obligations in the future, it's important that you look out that at least 5 years for future planning. I'm also in charge of the annual budget, which is, as this board is presented each year, the projects that we are currently undertaking as a CRA.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Can you please describe to us the most impactful redevelopment project you have been involved in?
I would say, again, it's easy for me to say the current because that's what I'm most proud of right at this moment, which would be the Clematis Streetscape. The CRA and myself was involved. I was involved as a project manager from the beginning of that project. Was integral in selecting the design team as well as the construction team for that, which came in both under budget and on time for the first 2 phases of this project, beginning to the last phase. But I'm also proud of previous projects, and as I started in this career in redevelopment, in recruiting and helping recruit Funky Buddha Brewery down in Oakland Park, Florida, and getting their doors open. It has been a great success for that city, and as well as the Funky Buddha itself, that have now expanded and large. Sorry. Anyway, those 2 projects I would say are my most proud.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neri.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Justice.
Good morning.
Can you explain your experience in working with culturally and economically diverse groups, and how do you build consensus among stakeholders to achieve an agency goal?
To me, the most of what we do is built on relationships. So relationships with every community, including within the communities in West Palm Beach. There are a couple different economically depressed communities in West Palm Beach. Obviously, this agency is doing a lot of work in the historic Northwest, and building a consensus is about building relationships. So it's getting to know the community members one-on-one. It's meeting them where they are. It is knowing what their values are and what they're looking for, and what they want. And I plan on continuing to build those relationships. I've built a lot of them over the last 6 years and look forward to continuing.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Ms. Justice. Could you describe for us a time when a project you were managing had unforeseen budget or timeline issues? How did you address those challenges?
I would say that Many of our projects have had some unforeseen budget issues, one being a project that I'm currently working on at 314 Clematis. As we moved forward with that project, there became some unforeseen issues structurally with a building. We were working with a property owner. We, at one point, determined that it wasn't valuable for this agency the CRA, to invest more money into a private property owner. And the decision at that point was to purchase the building, to have an asset for this agency and for the city.
Commissioner Riles.
Tell us about, and good morning, Ms. Justice. Can you tell us about a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved? What made it politically sensitive? And what was your role in the situation? And what was the outcome and result?
There are often politically sensitive situations. The most recent being the project that we hope to get off the ground in the Rosemary and 3rd Street. It is politically sensitive because it is they are asking for a good deal of subsidy from this agency. It is in, as mentioned before, a culturally sensitive area. So in dealing with community and with the developer, it's getting the right project for the community, and does it make sense to give the right subsidy from this agency? I believe we came up with a good solution. We have not all 100% community support, but a lot of community support on this project, and I believe it was a good outcome to that sensitive situation.
Thank you. Commissioner Schoaf.
Can you describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on a highly controversial community redevelopment issue that generated community and stakeholder interest on all sides? You can say it again.
Can you say it again? Yes.
Can you describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on a highly controversial community redevelopment issue that generated community and stakeholder interest on all sides?
Well, the first key to that is an understanding what the stakeholder views are. I think that it's important to know where the community stands on a project. And again, whether you have positive, you're always going to have some supporters and some detractors. It's making sure that this project was majority wanted this project. Staff recommendation then is to, again, prepare each board member with the facts and the benefits of the project, and then also having the community that supports come out and actually support the project in public. It's important for board members to understand the constituents and what they think and how they feel about a project.
Ms. Justice, other than relying on industry associations, for example, the Florida Redevelopment Association or ICSC, how do you stay informed on cutting-edge redevelopment activities and industry trends?
Google, I would say. I do subscribe to different online publications that provide redevelopment advice and stories about other cities, International Downtown Association, ULI. All of these agencies have online publications that they get out to us to make sure that we're well informed.
Very good, thank you. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. Allison, can you please describe your most often used management style, and please use some examples?
I have been, even as the deputy, really in charge of the staff at the CRA for the last 5 or 6 years. And I would say communication, it's going to be a recurring theme of mine, communication with staff, communication with city staff, and that's my leadership style. It's, obviously very open door policy, and providing an opportunity for staff to come with ideas and guide them from that by communicating with them.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. We're on question 10. How do you balance the duties of the start over. How do you balance the duties of the CRA Executive Director position, given that this position is a city employee reporting to a CRA board, but all the CRA staff are contractors?
I wouldn't, I don't foresee it functioning much different than it functions now. I report to this board as it stands, and the staff, I have some insider knowledge being a part of the staff currently with RMA, but again, being familiar with the staff that is there and familiar with the contractor that we have, I believe I'm in a good and unique position to lead them in the direction that we need to go and that the board needs to go. Ultimately, my direction comes from the board, which means my direction to our contractor will be led by the board.
Okay. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Tell us about a specific time when you had to handle a tough problem which involved ethical issues or in which you felt your integrity was tested.
Luckily in this environment in West Palm Beach, I haven't experienced that. I would say in a past life, I would have to go back to a past experience that I had with the marketing company, and really what's dealing with a problem client. And sometimes clients want things that you are unable to provide. I don't know that it wasn't necessarily ethically, but I say you have to be strong in your response. We are in a position where we cannot be compromised ethically. So if I had a commissioner that was, or anyone that was asking me to do something that wasn't within the boundaries of what we do, I would, be transparent and honest and give advice not to move forward with that.
Commissioner Riles.
Are there any ethical issues in your background that we should be aware of? And is there anything that you would like to share with us that you believe requires an explanation?
No ethical issues, and very proud of the fact that I was trained. I've been trained the last 8 years by two of the most respected people in the redevelopment business. But this is the position that I've been trained for, and I am prepared for. And this is a position that I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, technically for the last 5 months, but I've been prepared for this position. I have the relationships, I believe, that are needed for this, the experience, and the leadership ability. So again, luckily I don't have any ethical issues, but that's all I guess I'd like to say beyond that.
Okay, that ends the round of prepared questions. Board members, you're free to ask questions. Commissioner Riles.
I think, thank you so much, Ms. Justice. I think that the elephant in the room is your relationship with RMA and how that will affect your ability to do your job. If there is a concern, it would be that you will have dual allegiances. Can you please explain to the board why we shouldn't feel that might be the case?
Of course. I'm, again, and I kind of brought that up the last, I'm happy I'm happy for my time at RMA. They've been very good to me, but my allegiance now and moving forward is with the city. And I have contractor relationships. We have contractor relationships all the time in the CRA, and people that I know, people that I've had relationships with, we have contractor relations. It's a small business, it's a small world, and RMA is very well aware. I've already had conversations with them about potential changes I'd like to see if we move forward, and they're very clear and understand that where my allegiance will lie is with this board, and I will maintain a professional relationship with RMA, and that's how I'll move forward.
Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the issues, speaking specifically as the District 1 Commissioner, that we've heard a lot about is the timeline on projects moving forward. If you were to be at the head of this organization and now be able to call the shots, how would you help to move our timelines along to show some projects out of the ground within our CRA districts?
Sure. Well, first I would say, I can't speak to history. So when we talk about the timelines on it from a historical basis, I can only move forward from here and what we're going to do going forward. One of the things I hear from the community is, especially on the north end, is lightening some restrictions for development to be able to allow something to happen. We have a challenging situation up there that economically the market isn't quite right for the development. We're working, as you know, on some key sites, and I think it's getting those negotiations done. And I'm committed to, and I have been working on trying to get those timelines moved forward. So in this position, I will, again, start to have some additional resources in the last 5 months, it's been me in a couple of different positions. So to have some additional resources, my focus will be on moving some of these projects forward on the north end.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I saw you wink, but I wasn't sure if that was for me. Ms. Justice, of all of the candidates, you have a bird's eye view of the inner workings of our CRA and know probably or can articulate some challenges as well as some opportunities. I'm curious as to, not necessarily from the community inertia in terms of challenges, but you specifically, can you talk about what you believe would be your biggest learning curve or challenge if offered the position?
Sure. I don't feel I have a large learning curve. There are items in redevelopment that I am still learning and learn every day. And if you don't, you're not doing your job, because there are things I'm not as experienced in. And the fact is I'm a project manager, so I know where to find the right resources to get the job done and to have the right expertise in the room when we are having those discussions. But one of my biggest challenges, I think, and I think I've expressed to all of you, is I'm all about efficiencies. So I want to get projects moving forward fast and efficiently. I don't like having a lot of cumbersome processes in the way. It's necessary in government. It is necessary, but I'd like to find a way that this agency, being set up to be more nimble, can be a little bit more nimble in moving some of these projects forward, and that's a challenge because we're working within government. So,
thank you.
Ms. Justice, what would be the first 3 changes you would like to make if you assume the position as permanent executive director?
I would like to rearrange some staff, first of all, and not in staff members. I have some really, really good team members. But again, going back to the efficiencies, I believe as a CRA staff, we can function a little more efficiently if I had the right, a couple different setups in the team. That would be the first thing. Obviously, I think the most important thing for my success is having the right people around me. Changes. Another thing that I'd like to do is there's a couple of projects we really need to start visioning on again. We're in a construction phase, and as you all know, the CRA goes through planning phases, construction phases. We're in a really heavy construction phase of which I'd like to be able to pass the torch on some of these projects, to have a project manager to get them done, so I can start thinking about what's next for the North End, what's next for Brailsford Park and some of our other redevelopment areas, what's next in the Northwest. So those are some things I'd like to see changed right when I hear.
Commissioner Buttigieg, did you have your hand up?
I did, but you and Commissioner Nearing covered the questions I was going to ask, so thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Madam, let's see down here. Commissioner Schultz, do you have another one?
I do.
But I think Madam President.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate you mentioning visioning, because that was a question that I wanted to ask you about, because you just mentioned you're a self-described project manager. So can you talk to us about your process for visioning and maybe even give an example of how you have brought an innovative idea, whether it's here or in previous work that you've done?
Sure, yeah. I think that when we talk about visioning can be the overall visioning. I mean, obviously, we've got goals really that are established by this board on the major strategic goals. When I was in Oakland Park, one of the, I guess, unique things as far as looking into the future is funding opportunities. That's I know that's a small part of the overall visioning, but I would say unique funding opportunities, grants, finding ways for unique programs. Our staff really was integral in establishing the TDR program for the churches over in the historic Northwest, which was very unique and critical to that neighborhood. So I would say continuing along those lines. Overall visioning, again, to me, it's the team. And we had, when we did in 2014, the North End visioning, we had the right team. RMA had some brilliant urban designers that really came to the table. We were new. I would do things differently. We were inexperienced when we came in here. But I foresee those types of engagements with the community continuing to move forward.
Okay, now Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you. As you know, we have a CRA advisory board that is a lower level board that reports to this board. How would you engage them moving forward if appointed executive director?
I think it's important for the CRA advisory board to know everything that the CRA board knows. So it had not always been done in the past, where the advisory board was brought every item that came to the CRA board, and that shouldn't happen. Again, it goes back to the relationships and communication is over communicate. They will let you know if they don't need to know information, but to me, it's just over communicating, and that's between meetings too. So whether it's emails to them or phone calls to them and having discussions about projects and using their expertise. We have some people on the board that have experience and expertise, and I want to use them to get their advice on projects.
Mr. Ross.
Yeah, I have heard, and I don't know, RMA is paid a monthly fee, and then they charge for extra things that they do that aren't controlled by that contract. Have you analyzed whether or not those expenses are excessive?
Yes, and I will tell you, it's one of the renegotiations. I cannot speak. I can speak for RMA now. It is one of the discussions we've been having moving forward with a modification to the RMA contract. An example is we use work authorizations for a construction manager. When we do a construction job, a lot of times an architect would provide a construction manager. Well, their fees are very excessive. RMA has provided that at a lower cost, but it has to be done through work authorizations because we don't have a full-time person on staff. Those costs, because we're under so much construction, aren't efficient anymore for the CRA. So it'd be more efficient to hire the construction manager as staff or an RMA staff and amend the contract. So that's an example of how we look at these and say, that's not an efficient way to handle that anymore, and let's modify.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. So, bedside manner is such an important, integral part of, I think, this position. And can you just talk about how you would communicate maybe a polarizing or non-polarizing issue to the community? That's the first part of the question. And that in the community doesn't want to hear it. How do you react to that? What do you do?
First of all, I think it's really important to, I think it's important to limit your exposure, but what I mean by that is put yourself in a situation where you have 100 people in a room and it's not going to be effective and everybody's going to scream and yell. I think it's best handled in bite-sized pieces, to get small groups together, to have discussions. You know, once the community becomes your advocate and they trust that you're moving something forward, they will also spread the word. So not that everybody doesn't need to know, but I think we have to strategically handle items that are polarizing in small bites. And we've been, I think, learned lessons and have come up with some effective ways to communicate in these groups. And I plan on one of the things, my third thing I would change that Mayor James had asked, is the way that we reach out and communicate with all of our communities, North End, Northwest, downtown, which all require a different form of communication.
Thank you.
Before I get to you, Madam President, let me ask, and we discussed this a little bit yesterday, and it's the Sunset Lounge. We are in the process of renovating that. What are your thoughts about what we do with it once it is renovated, operating it, maintaining it, managing it?
Yeah, so as we discussed, and I know I don't know if Mr. Ward had discussed with the board before, is, cultural facilities in general don't make money on their own, and this is a community asset and a community facility. This agency, we will future budget, you talk about future budgets, will be obligated to fund operations of this facility for the foreseeable future. Now, whether that becomes a foundation or a community development corporation that the Sunset operates under, that has their own board, I think that we still have to work through how that looks. But you'll definitely need an operations manager. Obviously, you're going to have a food and beverage manager. You're going to have a marketing arm of the Sunset Lounge. And there's many models out there of how it can work as far as the operation goes. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't try and pull the wool over anyone's eyes to say that this agency will not be supporting that for the foreseeable future. But operations-wise, I think we have several different options to look at. But those are the pieces that are going to have to be in place.
Madam President.
Thank you. We've obviously had some great successes in our CRAs here, but something that I've been hearing from multiple community members is a desire for change in this role. And I would say the areas that I'm hearing that they would like some change is in the tone of community outreach, accountability, and action. What can you share with us that would instill confidence in us and our community members who are listening to this, that you would provide that change, or if you would provide that change?
I am the tone, all I can say is my personality is very different than our previous director. I approach things very differently. I'm about the relationships. I respect the fact that every community member has their opinion, and I'm not above that. And so, the confidence in the tone is that this is a change because I am a completely different person. Can you ask the second part of your question?
It was accountability and action, and just what would you do to instill that you'd make those changes?
I'm accountable to this board, so this is what I do every day is going to come in front of this board, and I expect that I would be held accountable for what we're doing as a CRA.
Commissioner Baduzzi?
Just to follow up with that, would it be correct to say that you're essentially in kind of a holding pattern till you see the outcome of this process to see if you're actually named the director? Not make too many changes right now just because of the fact that you don't necessarily know whether you have the full support of the system at this point?
I believe we did a very effective job of keeping the wheels on the bus in the last 5 months and moving things forward. I'm very proud of what we've done. But the fact remains is we are down some resources, and there are things that I would like to move faster and make some decisions on that you are correct. I mean, I don't think this board would have been willing to make some of those decisions as an interim, in the interim until somebody in this position was full-time.
Commissioner Shove?
Thank you. May I have a process clarification from Human Resources? Would that be okay?
Sure. We have a process question.
Process, as it pertains to our open-ended questions, I've heard some questions here that pertain specific to candidate background that we wouldn't ask other candidates. Is this an open question that we can ask any question of background, or we should ask consistent questions we would ask of any candidate?
No, every candidate has a unique resume, so you can ask questions as long as they're related to things that will help you decide whether they're qualified or they would be effective in the position. You can ask questions that are unique to the experience that certain candidates have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that your question?
No, to follow up.
Oh, okay.
To follow up on that, we have a 6-member board here. Sometimes we don't always agree on what projects should move forward. So how would you handle it if we have competing needs or competing desires on a specific project? How would you handle that conflict?
It's the same way you handle community input, and that's with a vote. I mean, there's always going to be, there's always, not always, this board agrees a lot on items to move forward, but if you're competing, it would come down to a point where I have to bring it in front of, an item in front of the board for you all to discuss and determine by a vote. It's always my goal to have a consensus, because I don't think that is productive to become, to have a conflict on it. But that's going to happen. I mean, it is going to happen.
Ms. Justice, talk to us about your thoughts about NCAT and its future, the role of the CRA in that. Because I know your predecessor was very involved. I don't know how much involvement you've had with that. I haven't heard much about it lately. So give me an idea of your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I believe the concept of NCAT, and then with the West Palm Beach Center for Arts and Technology, I think it's a big vision. It's a big project. I am anxious to see. They do have a board. And they do have a board that is beginning fundraising, and they have a board that is negotiating with a private sector, I guess, building to be able to house their facility. So I'm excited about the progress they're making with some of their negotiations. I think it's too early to tell whether they can raise the funding required to build the building. I don't believe this agency, this is a nonprofit, I don't believe this agency should be held to the entire construction of this building, but we have committed in the bond $5 million towards a match. We have not brought to the board what that match looks like and what the agreement is going to be. So I do know they're moving forward as a board. I'm excited about the project if they can get some funding under them and start fundraising, because I think it'd be great for the community, great job training, great coordination with the Sunset Lounge if it can get up and running between the jobs, the culinary jobs, as well as the art training.
Okay. Any other questions? Are there none? Ms. Justice, thank you for your interest in this position, and we'll be back in touch.
Thank you very much.
I do have a comment, Mayor.
Well, no. No, I'm only kidding. Go ahead.
I was just
Sit
gonna
down.
No, it's not a question. It was just a comment that we're left with 12 minutes, and you did mention in your comments that you love and appreciate efficiency, so I thought she was very efficient with her time.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Madam President.
Just my efficiency observation.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
So that I could use more time.
No, we're going to take a little time, right? No, 18, 30 seconds. Okay, oh, it's quick.
I will go ahead and do the overview of your next candidate's experience. It's Kristen Maury. She currently serves as the Director of Economic Development for the City of Deerfield Beach, previously as the Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency for Deerfield Beach, and also as the Vice President of the Holistic Planning Group. Members of the Board, Kristen Maury.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Maury, for coming. We have opted not to take opening statements, so if you don't mind, we're going to dive right into the questions. I have the honor of asking the first question. How has your background and experience prepared you to be successful in the position of Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency?
Thank you for that question, Mayor. Everything I've done in my professional career has prepared me for this job. I've been working and gaining experience for the last 26
If you
years.
could speak closer to the mic, please, because we're having this recorded.
Absolutely. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you. Every position I've had has been increasingly more and more challenging. And of course, I feel that this position would be just the next step in that professional development for me and my professional challenges. As you can see from my resume, I've been a CRA director in Florida for the last 20 years in 2 positions. So, certainly that has prepared me as well. I do my job well in Deerfield Beach, and I hope to bring those skills here. I do participate in the State Redevelopment Association, and I contribute to best practices. In other words, other people take examples from what I do to make their CRAs better.
Thank you. Madam President?
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. Can you please describe your background in budget preparation and administration, specifically in short and long-term budget planning?
Mm-hmm. So obviously the CRA budget's a working document, a living tool that we use to not just plan our projects, but to use as a benchmark for our performance as well. So the CRA annual budget for me actually starts in April. I tend to, or I regularly give what I call the mid-year accomplishments report to my board. In other words, at the 6-month mark of any fiscal year, I tell my board what we've accomplished so far, for information to let them know what we're working on. And most importantly, that's what I consider to be our first budget hearing, because when we look at our mid-year accomplishments, we take those accomplishments and we project what we're going to be able to accomplish by the end of that year, and then we actually use that as a directive to prepare the budget for next year and as a basis for me to prepare our capital improvements plan. The capital improvements plan is sometimes an undervalued tool, but to me it's very important to be able to look forward 5 years. 1, to get directives from the board in terms of your priorities, and 2, to make sure that we're managing cash flow properly so that we can fund projects in a fiscally responsible way. So, that's what I think is important in terms of the 6 months out from when you would typically actually even start thinking about the budget come July and August. And of course, I prepare a budget every year, so I'd be more than willing to talk to you about all the ins and outs of line item by line item considerations and that type of thing.
Commissioner Neary?
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Maury. Can you describe to us the most impactful redevelopment project you have been involved in?
That's the tough one. Which one to pick? I would think that probably the most impactful one in the last, let's say, 10 years for me has been our very successful Sullivan Park project. I talked to many of you about that yesterday, or in our one-on-ones yesterday. It was rewarding because, one, it took 6 years to put together, so it was a labor of love. It's something that I believed very strongly in, and didn't take no for an answer on many, many times during the process. I'm proud of it because it took so much to put it together, not just in terms of money. It's a smaller $4 million project, but when you look at it today, it's beautiful, and people really, really, they connect to it, and it's just a prime example of community building. The centerpiece of this project, it's a waterfront park on the Intercoastal Waterway, so you can relate to that, I'm sure. And we took a piece of property that formerly had an abandoned restaurant on it that was, pretty much decimated by Hurricane Wilma. And we bought the property out of foreclosure. So they're definitely removing slum and blight as per, what the CRA is about. And we took that property and we assembled it with 3 other properties. And we negotiated a long-term construction agreement with FDOT to actually build an FDOT right-of-way to expand this park even further. We got the Florida Inland Navigation District on board with it, which is perhaps an underutilized resource here in West Palm Beach from what I gathered yesterday. They do fund projects that enhance the public's access to the Intercoastal Waterway. And this project did that. We built an 11-slip marina when South Florida Water Management District only wanted us to have 3. And we said, no, we want 11. And we got 11. We got that through lobbying, and it took 1.5 years, but we got 11. So I hope you can see that I'm proud because we didn't take no for an answer, and we fought for what we thought was right, what I thought was right. And then the best part of Sullivan Park now is its impact on the community. When we were designing the park, Deerfield Beach did not have a public art program, believe it or not. And it's something that the community wanted. So the CRA took the lead, and we hired a professional artist, a graffiti artist from the Wynwood neighborhood. And he worked with school children in the neighborhood to design the art for our Sullivan Park splash pad. And it ended up being, I will probably never do it again, but it's beautiful. It's a 52-foot wide splash pad featuring children's art. The mosaic in the splash pad was hand-laid by people in the community. So everybody who participated in the public art effort really has literally their fingerprint on that park. And they come back. It's something that draws people in, and it brings them back into the community. People from all across the city participated. So it really was something, a CRA-funded project that really brought the community together.
Okay. Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Explain your experience in working with culturally, let me turn my mic on. Explain your experience in working with culturally and economically diverse groups and how you build consensus among stakeholders to achieve an agency goal.
So building consensus amongst different people from different walks of life is an ongoing challenge in public life in general. So in our CRA, one thing that we do is try to go above and beyond the call of duty to bring in people that don't normally participate in the public arena or in public projects. So one thing that we've been doing in the last couple of years that we've just realized that there is underrepresentation amongst certain communities, people who are economically challenged, people who are just not interested in local politics or what city government does. And so one of the things that I've done in the past couple of years to get those people involved is we've tried to develop, go into neighborhoods and try to identify younger people, people who are millennials, so the younger generation, and try to identify people who have leadership aspirations and develop that leadership skill so that those people can go back into the community and speak with people on a one-to-one basis so that that message, whatever the message is for our redevelopment projects, is coming from the community and not from Chris Morey. And so making those people really the champions of what we're doing, has been a a big emphasis. I'd also say that in Deerfield Beach, above and beyond the African-American minority population, we have a very large Brazilian population. And one of the things that I did, it ended up working out really very well. I hired a woman, and she's brilliant, but she speaks Portuguese and Spanish. And having her at my side when we go into communities and being able to relate to people in their language has been extremely powerful in terms of accomplishing our goals.
Commissioner Rouse.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Describe to us a time when a project you were managing had unforeseen budget or timeline issues, and how did you address those challenges?
Every large-scale project, has its challenges. The skill is in how you address it and how you manage it. Every project that I deal with has something. There's always something. Is it an unsatisfactory soil report? Is it a permitting holdup? All those types of things. Is it a lack of people who want to bid on a project? All of those things are part and parcel of redevelopment, and that's, as a redevelopment professional, what I deal with. All I can say is that because I have so much experience, managing capital projects, and managing capital projects is my thing. That's probably the part of CRA work that I enjoy the most. I don't roll up my sleeves and get involved in it so much anymore on a day-to-day basis, but I do have a lot of construction experience, so where a lot of people might tend to get delays in capital projects, because of my experience, I tend to be able to work through them quicker than a lot of people might. I understand soup to nuts how to take a project through permitting. In fact, that's a value-added skill service that we provide to our businesses in the CRA. If they have a problem, I just walk downstairs to the building department and figure it out and expedite it through. Budget problems, really have not been an issue for us because, quite frankly, we take the time up front to really look at our plans before they're bid and make sure that that's what we want. We also do include a contingency budget in our CRA projects of usually 10%, which is actually pretty conservative. A lot of people, want to put 20% in, but we've been successful over the past 10 years in Deerfield Beach. We've never had a project go over budget or be late coming in on time.
Commissioner Shove.
Thank you. Can you tell us about a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved? What made it politically sensitive? What was your role in the situation, and what was the outcome or result? I can read it again for you if you need it. There's a lot in there.
Yeah. Working at this level in local government, the politics that are at play in the community are always in the background or on your radar screen. As a member of the executive management team, where I go grocery shopping is sometimes political. So I'm very aware of that, and I conduct myself as if when I'm in public, I'm always in public, and I take that responsibility very seriously. This past year has actually been a very politically charged year in Deerfield Beach. Our former city manager left the city after 18 years of service, and a lot of people saw me as in his pocket or his person, and what they don't realize is that I'm a redevelopment professional, and I'm here to serve you and whoever is sitting in your seats. And there's a reason I've been doing this for 26 years, is that whoever is in charge, is the person that I report to, the board I report to. And I take that very seriously. So when he left, it was a very politically charged atmosphere because many, people, again, with social media and whatnot, were on blogs and insinuating things were improper and that kind of thing. But I just did my job. I weathered the storm, And, all of that went away. But that's what we do as professionals in the public sector.
Blogs, social media. We don't have that problem here in West Palm. I'm sorry.
Wonderful.
Describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on highly controversial community redevelopment issues that generate community and stakeholder interest on all sides.
Research, research, research. In my experience, the facts are the things that sometimes set you free and find the way forward. Anytime there's something that's controversial, I do my very best to go back into history and to describe to people, steps A through Z about how the situation started, the steps that, led us to this point in time. And then, of course, using my professional expertise and experience, make that recommendation based on, one, history, two, professional knowledge about best practices and that kind of thing, and the ever-important one-on-one conversations that I have with each member of the board before making a decision and before actually finishing that report.
Madam President.
Thank you. Other than relying on industry associations, for example, the Florida Redevelopment Association or ICSC, how do you stay informed on cutting-edge redevelopment activity and industry trends?
I'm an information junkie. I subscribe to leaders in the industry. That's actually one of the reasons I'm interested in West Palm Beach is because you have so much cutting edge type of activities going on here, and that's really something that's attractive to me. But in terms of staying up to date on things, yes, in addition to FRA and ICSC, I'm also a member, I'm actively follow the Florida League of Cities. I follow the Urban Land Institute. Many blogs on the topic. Planetizen is a really good information source. And actually, just networking with other professionals in my field. In Broward County, we have the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. Here you have the Business Development Board. But I make it a point to take time out of my schedule at least once a month to go to their meetings, to stay on top of what's happening in Broward County in the bigger picture. Sometimes things are happening next door that if you don't go out and, participate regionally, you wouldn't even know about. And so I feel like it's very important, to participate regionally and face-to-face on those particular issues. The other thing that, as somebody who works for a CRA, that I do to stay on top of things is monitor our legislative sessions. Right now, CRAs are a hot topic in Tallahassee. Not right now, forever. CRAs have been a hot topic in Tallahassee. And that's something that is very important as a professional in this field to stay on top of and advocate for.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. What is your most often used management style? Please provide examples that explain your style.
My management style is recognizing the strengths of my staff and maximizing those strengths. I'm only as good as the people that are around me and support me. I can't float the boat all by myself. So I'm all about empowering my staff, letting them know that they're good at what they do because they are. They wouldn't be there unless they were unless they were good, and supporting them. I respect them, and when I respect them, I feel like they give me their all. I don't micromanage them. I let them have as much leeway as they need to do their job because they have good judgment themselves. So I'm very much kind of a collaborator. I like to bring my team together from time to time, even if we don't have anything to talk about, just to talk about ideas or talk about what's going on in their life, talk about anything and brainstorm things. It's amazing where ideas come from just by sitting around and, sharing a cup of coffee.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. How would you balance the duties of the CRA Executive Director position given that this position is a city employee reporting to the CRA board, but all the CRA staff are contractors?
So that's actually something I was thinking about this morning, is how that's actually going to play out. The one thing I can say is that so currently I'm in a position where I actually started in Deerfield Beach as a contract employee myself, and I worked in that construct for probably 5 years or so, until the city brought me on as a full-time in-house staff person. My CRA staff are actually contract employees. So although I'm a city employee now, they are contract employees. So I work with that model right now. Now, we do have an interlocal agreement where those employees are treated in the same way as the city. So it is seamless, and to me, it's a piece of paper differentiating them from the rest of city staff. But that is the construct that I work under right now. So I'm very used to working as a city employee and as a contract employee.
Thank you. Commissioner Ross.
Can you tell us about a specific time when you had to handle a tough problem which involved ethical issues, or in which you felt your integrity was tested?
People will test you all the time if they're allowed to. So as a CRA director, of course, you're in charge of a fairly large amount of money, so ethics are very important in what I do, and I do take it very seriously. It's not even that long ago that I didn't participate in a meeting with someone because they are bidding on city business, and I didn't want to even have it appear that there was impropriety. Someone else could take that meeting instead of me. So it's not just real ethical issues, it's the appearance of ethical issues that I take seriously. I can't really even give you an example of a time I've been pressed, because it's just so natural for me to take my ethical obligations seriously that I don't even seem to get in that position to start with, because I know what to avoid. I know the standards that I should be held to, and I adhere to them.
Commissioner Shove.
Are there any ethical issues in your background that we should be aware of? Is there anything you would like to share with us that you believe requires an explanation?
No.
Okay, that ends the first round of prepared questions. Commissioners, board members, do you have any additional questions you would like to ask? Yes, Madam President.
Thank you so much. As we're interviewing you here today and yesterday and the community meetings that you've attended, I also hope that you're putting some thought into interviewing us and determining if we're a good fit for you. So that being said, I presume that you did your research on us, whether it was about the city and the CRA districts, or specifically how the CRA works and the budgets. Can you please demonstrate to us your understanding of that and your thought process in doing that?
So I have had 8 hours to reflect on what happened yesterday. And just first of all, I mean this very sincerely, I've been so impressed by all of you. You are so professional, and your questions were wonderful. I really enjoyed the time with you yesterday. And as a board, you have a wonderful mix of competencies, legal competencies, construction and real estate competencies, marketing, community engagement. It's all together. You, as a body, get all of the needs of these different districts in the CRA, and that really came through yesterday. So, I think for me, the biggest concern really is the newness of this organizational structure, and how the CRA would be supportive of a CRA director and as an employee, in terms of support and in terms of my ability to manage the team of contractual employees that I'd be inheriting. That really is the major concern. The commute right now would be a little bit tough, being on I-95. But in terms of the board, I was just incredibly impressed by you all yesterday. And I had done my research before and was just very pleased to meet you all.
Commissioner Shove?
Thank you. You've heard some feedback that some of the challenges that we face as a CRA are taking projects and getting them off the ground and getting them to completion. And you said something that I want to revisit because it was a pretty bold statement. You said you have never had a project go over budget or miss a timeline. So talk to us about that, how you could achieve that, and what strategies you could employ in the city of West Palm Beach to make that a reality.
Well, it's not a bold statement, it's the truth. And so, I'm not saying that to brag. It's something that is very important to me. It's something that makes my board very happy. And so if that's part of my performance, I take it seriously and I do it. I did hear yesterday about how people from certain areas in the CRA were dissatisfied with the speed of projects being implemented. All I can say is that, I bring to this job my whole body of experience in terms of, understanding public procurement, understanding how to put together a good set of plans, how to look at those plans and make sure they're ready to bid. And before we, issue a notice to proceed, we make sure all of our ducks are in a row so that when I tell you, board, we're ready to roll on May 1st, this project is going to take 10 months. I'm very certain about it. Now, there's always things that come up, but if things do come up, I tell you in my monthly reports, this is what's happening out in the field. I believe in complete honesty and transparency on those things. And in terms of the budget, as I mentioned, when we let projects go, the cost of them, I'm really certain of it. It's not something that's going to change that drastically. When we put in 10% contingencies, we usually walk away from our projects with money left over in the account. And that's just through good management, good capital project management.
A project that we have here, which you may have heard about, is something called the Sunset Lounge in our historic Northwest. And we purchased the property. We are currently undergoing a renovation of the property. And a question that this body will have to deal with is, what are we going to do with the property? Do you have any thoughts on how our CRA can manage, operate what will now be an entertainment venue? We're not in the entertainment business. Any thoughts on that?
So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that the CRA is probably not talented in the area of musical venue management. So things that you're not good at, you need to bring in expertise to make up for. And so managing that type of venue is extremely specific. So I think that the CRA would need to go outside and get that expertise through probably a request for a qualifications process, RFQ, excuse me. And then more than likely, you would need to bring somebody in for the evaluation to sit on your team who's also experienced in the field to help the board evaluate those proposals. Because I can tell you, I don't know how to run a musical venue. And I'm not afraid to say that, but that's why we have outside professionals come in and help us. I have had the experience with our Deerfield Beach Pier project where part of the pier entrance buildings contain a restaurant. I don't know how to run a restaurant either. I can barely cook. So we brought in an outside consultant to sit on the evaluation committee with us to evaluate those proposals. Did we learn from the process? Absolutely. I'm much more qualified at evaluating a restaurant now than I was 10 years ago. But again, you would need to bring in outside expertise to help you evaluate that so that it's properly managed. That is something to take very seriously because of the amount of money that the CRA is going to put into that project. You want to make sure that you're ensuring your investment. You don't want to put money in and then have someone run it into the ground or mismanage it. It's a poor reflection on you, and it does the neighborhood no justice.
Commissioner Neary?
Thank you. You had 2 opportunities yesterday to interact with the public, and I'm sure you can tell how important communication is. Can you talk a little bit about your style in terms of communicating, not just polarizing projects, but just communication in general as it relates to the public?
I had an interesting conversation last evening actually. There was a group of gentlemen sitting off to the corner, excuse me, not participating, and I had just finished a conversation, and I said, well, you know what, I'm just going to walk over. And I walked over and pulled up a chair and sat down and started talking to them. And we were, talking about this, that, and the other thing, and joking around. And the one gentleman said, who are you? And I said, oh, you don't know? I said, I'm Chris Morey. And he said, what do you mean? He said, do I know you? And I said, no, I'm one of the candidates. And he didn't even know I was a candidate. And what I'm telling you this story is because that's just me. I like to talk to people. I'm not socially awkward. I'm friendly, and we hit it off.
Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Shelf?
Thank you. We have a lower board that is an advisory board to this board, the CRA advisory board, the CRAP board. What do you envision as their role as it pertains to the executive director role in this board?
So I met some people of the advisory board at last evening's meet and greet. It's been a while since I've worked with an advisory board, actually. I haven't worked with one until the last one I worked with was back in Plantation. We don't have an advisory board right now. Excuse me. But the advisory board plays an important role. You have very busy schedules, and so that board plays the role of informing you about what's going on and being the pulse of what's going on in the neighborhood. So I would count on them as being an important resource to communicate back and forth to the neighborhoods.
Okay. Madam President?
Thank you. I'm not sure, maybe I didn't get to the heart of my question that I last asked. I was trying to get at the fact that if we hire someone who is not currently on our staff for CRA, that there will be some learning curve in understanding our projects. And I certainly understand you have to get in the job sometimes to see some of those. But I was hopeful that you could demonstrate some of the research that you may have done prior to coming here about our community or about our CRA.
Sure. I did several different things. I'm sorry if I didn't get to the heart of the matter before. Number one, I talked to people that I know that are active in the community. Actually, one of my coworkers sits on your Downtown Neighborhood Association. His name is Steve Graham. He's actually one of our city planners in Deerfield Beach. So I went directly to him and said, okay, I need the pulse on what's going on in downtown. So he obliged. That was very nice of him. And so a lot of one-on-one discussions. I spoke with actually a friend of mine, Dr. Ned Murray. He's a professor at FIU. He is very active in studying redevelopment and housing issues in South Florida. So I needed to bone up on affordable housing. He helped me a lot in that regard. Excuse me. And then I talked to actually my former boss, Burgess Hanson, who is now the city manager for the Indian Trail Water Management District. He is a resident of Okeechobee, Loxahatchee, out west, and so he's involved in the transportation board and things like that, and very knowledgeable about West Palm Beach. So I spent a lot of time with him, and those are examples of the personal research that I did, because anyone can go on your website and read about projects, but I wanted to kind of get to the heart of who you are as a community.
Question I have is, and I don't know if in your research you stumbled across a undertaking of our CRA, which is something called NCAT, National Center for something.
Arts and technology.
Yeah, yeah, that too. We are committed to putting up a match of about $5 million for their physical facility, and I don't know if you've heard of such an organization or familiar with or have any thoughts about what role going forward our CRA should play.
So I'm not, before yesterday, I was not familiar with it. So, but that said, it's an innovative idea. And coincidentally, I'm working on a similar type approach to a problem in Deerfield Beach. In Deerfield Beach, I'll just use that as an example because I think it's applicable. We're very fortunate that we have a very solid concentration of advanced industries. And we're very lucky because those advanced industries pay wonderful salaries. And so part of the strategy is how do we enhance that? How do we nurture that, make it stable and make it grow? And at the same time, we have these great jobs, but we have pockets of extreme poverty in the city along our Dixie Highway corridor. We have census tracts that have more than 30% poverty and more than 18% unemployment today. In this economy, we have that. And that's not acceptable. So one of the strategies that we launched over this past year is it's a new organization. It was actually launched by James McCulley. He's the founder of Square, the swiping technology. He founded a not-for-profit organization called Launch Code. And if you haven't met them yet, you need to, because what they do is brilliant. They have a 6-week training course, excuse me, that teaches people, regardless of their educational attainment. And by that I mean you do not even have to have a high school education. You have to have a creative mind. And they give you a test, and if you have that creative mind, you qualify. And so you can come to this course, it's free, and if you can dedicate 3 nights a week for 6 months, you walk out of that program with a full certification as a coder. And you can walk into City Furniture, you can walk into the city of West Palm Beach, every company is a tech company now. You can walk into those companies and be a coder and make, the day you walk out, $50,000 salary. Wonderful. So we didn't just launch the program, but now we're in phase 2 where we're trying to launch Code and help them have a physical location in Deerfield Beach, because we like them, they like us, and we want them to choose Deerfield Beach as their home. So it's a great, that approach is a great approach. If you can get the training provided in your community and get the organization to have a physical presence in your community, it's a win-win.
Thank you. Any other questions, Madam President?
Thank you. You've talked a little bit about some partnerships, FDOT and Florida Inland Navigation District. Can you speak to any other partnerships? I mean, even the one you just gave, but any other ones that stick out in your mind that have been help you to be successful in your CRAs?
More and more, everything is a partnership. The CRA can't do everything itself. The CRA is great for funding. The CRA is great for implementing projects, but there's no reason to work in a silo. There are organizations out there doing such important work in the community that it would be shameful not to form these partnerships. In West Palm Beach, what I heard yesterday was, the CRA has some neighborhoods that have problems that go well beyond infrastructure. And so the CRA is not, the capacity is not in terms of social services and that kind of thing. So that's an area ripe for partnership, to have services follow infrastructure. It just makes logical sense to me. So I'm a big proponent of forming partnerships and bringing in partners from outside, if not for anything else, to make the CRA dollars go further.
We do have a few minutes left. Do you have any questions for us?
I don't think so. I'm about to lose my voice.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, thank you for your time and thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
And we will be getting back to you a bit later. Thank you. Order. There we go.
Members of the board, your next candidate is Giovanni Moss. He is currently the Senior Project Manager for Innovative Emergency Management in Tallahassee. Prior, served as the Community Development Director and Community Redevelopment Director for the town of Davie, and prior to that, as the town of Davie's Housing and Community Development Director. Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. We have decided not to take any opening comments, and we're going to dive right into the questions. And I believe the first questioner will be Madam President Amber.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hey, good
Thank you
morning.
for joining us again. Can you please tell us, how has your background and experience prepared you to be successful in the position of Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency here?
Okay. Well, first I wanted to start by thanking the mayor and the members of the commission for selecting me to be a final candidate. You guys have a Herculean task because you have some great candidates that I'm sure you interviewed before me. So I'm sure it's going to be a tough decision. But I, again, thank you for selecting me as one of the candidates. To respond to your question, at some point, we all become a culmination of our skills, education and work history. So I'm sure you guys have all had a chance to review my resume. So I came into this profession because I wanted to be in service. So I had my undergrad work and master's work in public administration. So my life commitment has been to be a public servant. So spent most of my career at the town of Davie. Started entry level, working with grassroots, working in targeted communities to assist underserved people in their areas. So I've rose up the ranks pretty quickly as a manager. Became a director at 29 of the Housing and Community Development Department, which allowed me to be able to jump into really assisting areas that have been underserved, slum and blight, and so forth. And then I became the Community Development Director, overseeing both the Housing and Community Development Department and also the Redevelopment Agency. And then like I said, took a break, 10-year break from public sector as the CRA Director now I serve as a Senior Project Manager for IEM.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. Mr. Moss, can you describe your background in budget preparation and administration, specifically in short and long-term budget planning?
So as a department director, it was always my responsibility to prepare multiple budgets for the Housing Development Department and also for the CRA. So there's typically a process that is followed, as a collective group, as department heads, that we present to the Budget and Finance Department, and then it's eventually approved by the City Commission or the CRA Board. So I've been, deeply involved in the preparation of those budgets to align with the CRA plan, the initiatives that the Commission or the CRA Board at the time wanted to be able to put forth within the community. So I've had extensive experience managing budgets, preparing them, and executing them, which is probably the most important aspect of the budgetary process.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
We're number 3, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Describe to us the most impactful redevelopment project you have been involved in.
Okay. So I've had the pleasure of being involved in great projects throughout my career, involved in a significant amount of new construction for workforce and affordable housing. When I got into the CRA work, market rate development, so I mentioned during my interviews with the commission that within 3 years I negotiated over $300 million of mixed-use development within a town. Prior to that, I probably managed over $50 million of extensive projects, either infrastructure, housing, new construction, single-family, rehabilitation throughout my career. So as far as the most impactful, it's always a great thing when you see projects that last beyond you. So I had the pleasure of building a Boys and Girls Club in a low-income area inside Davie, which was, phenomenal. I've been involved in, again, the construction of multifamily developments, single-family developments, and to be able to put someone in a home that you know beyond your tenure as a department director or a public servant, to me, is probably the most impactful. But again, the breadth of my work has been across the board, from water and sewer projects, roadway projects, utility projects, and again, building public facilities. So I have, just throughout my career, it started from the inception and completed multiple projects. Well, but the most impactful is probably the Boys and Girls Club.
Commissioner Ross.
Good morning.
Morning.
Explain your experience in working with culturally and economically diverse groups, and how do you build consensus among stakeholders to achieve an agency goal?
First, I want to compliment the city staff and, of course, the commission for approving the process. I think the ability to be able to meet with you guys individually, to kind of understand how you look at this, how you perceive the CRA, the concerns you have, the vision as far as moving forward has been great. The community interaction, even though it was unique, was very helpful to kind of see that the people have a passion for their area. Just, and it's very exciting also because they have a passion for growth. Sometimes you go in a community, they don't want to see anything changed. So there's definitely levels of frustration as it relates to projects not moving forward or things that they haven't seen in certain areas, but there's definitely a passion for growth. So coming from a housing and community development background, I've always focused on dealing with individuals at the ground level, engaging them either required by use of federal resources or wanting to really engage those individuals so we can build a community that they're going to be proud of. So I think the key part is engaging them at the conception of the vision, not walking into a community meeting with renderings completed, give them an opportunity to have a skin in the game, co-opt them into the process. So I think ongoing communication is key, but the huge part is starting with them at the ground level and then building up. They won't always agree, but I think the key aspect is that once you engage them initially, then you have a better chance of success.
Commissioner Shove.
Thank you. Can you describe to us a time when you had a project you were managing that had unforeseen budget or timeline issues, and how did you address those challenges?
I mean, we do live in South Florida, so unfortunately, we have multiple storms that are usually, coming on our shore that we have to prepare for. So I think I've been involved in multiple projects that were, moving forward quickly, but we had to stop and slow down and, mobilize because of storms. And again, I think I've been involved in projects where I've been pushed by funding source to expend money quickly. So you have to be able to kind of manage that process better and push the envelope to get across the finish line. So I didn't give you a specific project because all my projects usually complete on time. If not, we adjust accordingly based on the resources we have.
Tell us about a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved. A, what made it politically sensitive? B, what was your role in the situation? And then C, what was the outcome and result?
Every community has families that are plugged into the political system. Either it's been there for a while. So I think in those same families, sometimes are the ones that push the envelope as relates to activities and projects and so forth. So I think I've been involved where matriarch families within the community wanted certain things done that might have been appropriate as it relates to using CRA funds. So I think the key part is just education, communicating to the political body that they're pressuring for assistance and letting them know, and walking them. I never provide a quick no. I walk, the political body or the actual requester through a process, and hopefully they come to the point where they realize that the funds can't be used or that's not an eligible expense. So I think back in Davie, there was an issue as far as a entity wanting us to provide ongoing maintenance at a public facility using CRA funds. And had to kind of educate them that, yes, even though the facility was located within the actual CRA, that ongoing maintenance wasn't an eligible expense. Now, we can do some capital improvements, and then you could pay for the ongoing maintenance. So it's just more so trying to create a solution without irritating the powers that be.
Madam President.
Thank you. Can you please describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on a highly controversial community redevelopment issue or issues that generate community and stakeholder interests on all sides?
Again, I think we go back to that initial comment that, engaging the community at the ground level is super important. I think, with the appropriate staff, doing the research on that project and fully briefing the CRA board on the pros and cons as relates to that actual matter. So I think, typically when I've prepared agendas in the past for the commission or CRA board, I've always offered a briefing session with the CRA board members to kind of understand every aspect of the project. And also, if there's an impact to community, brief them on the issues, pros and cons, open communication. So I think that is the most important part, preparing all the stakeholders involved and then sharing things and being open and transparent about the process. What are the pros, what are the cons, what is the impact to the CRA and its residents?
Commissioner Neri.
Thank you. Other than relying on industry associations, for example, the Florida Redevelopment Association or ICSC, how do you stay informed on cutting-edge redevelopment activities and industry trends?
You have over 200 plus CRAs across Florida, and they all have great CRA directors, managers, and staff, and so forth. So I think sometimes going on their website, seeing what they're doing. I have most of them are my colleagues, so giving them a call and just walking through a process, because it's nothing new under the sun. So I think that's key. Just in throwing yourself in the industry as far as active projects, it helps you too, because you're able to see what will be the pitfalls moving forward if you venture into the same type activities. So I think it's just jumping on the websites, talking to them directly about the process. It's where I kind of stay abreast, and of course, still going to FRA conferences and learning best practices are still important to be able to hone your craft.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you. What is your most often used management style? Provide examples that explain your style.
So I think I would say teamwork. So co-opting my full staff and stakeholders into the process, if that's either staff that direct me reportedly or subcontractors, realizing that we all have, a common goal is to complete a particular activity, project, or activity. But I want everybody at every level feel that they have some type of input in the process. So I think, I have weekly meetings with my staff where we receive input on things that are going on. And I think that they feel engaged, good or bad. Sometimes I might not listen to the recommendation because it might not be the direction I want to take, but I think making them feel they're part of the process. So I don't know if I have a particular, instance. That's just the way I approach things, is a teamwork approach.
Commissioner Rouse.
How do you balance the duties of the CRA Executive Director position, given that the position is a city employee reporting to the CRA board, but all of the CRA staff are contractors?
It's a good question. Again, I think we've had multiple discussions during our individual interviews that once the support staff provides what I need to be able to do the work of the CRA, I have no concerns. I think we'll discuss that collectively as we move forward. But most CRAs operate on a very slim staff. So I think using a subcontractor that has access to other support aspects of the CRA could be extremely useful. But there's also might be a point later on where you want to have, again, like a city staff person that you might want to bring on board. But I think the the board has made the right decision to bring the CRA director and you guys have him report to you, because again, I think it's important that from an internal standpoint, working with other city members for overall productivity within the community is probably the best case scenario.
Commissioner Schoaf.
Can you tell us about a specific time when you had to handle a tough problem which involved ethical issues or in which you felt your integrity was tested?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I think I think that's why it's probably good you have multiple, bosses, right? So the full city commission. In some cases, there might be an individual that has their own personal agenda, and if you report to that person only, then there might be an issue for it. So, unfortunately, in the past, I've had a city manager that would typically get involved in real estate transactions, and would want me to use a particular agent to acquire property to make the contracts assignable to the CRA. And I would typically, again, not always a quick no, but I would make sure that we went through the appropriate process as far as procuring the real estate agent and making sure that our CRA attorney would review all documents. So again, it probably caused some issues between me and that city manager, but I operate at a high level of integrity and ethical work, so I wouldn't stand for that.
Okay. Tangentially related, are there any ethical issues in your background that we should be aware of? Is there anything that you would like to share with us that you believe requires an explanation?
No, I think I've shared with majority of the board that, my previous employment, after 15 years of exemplary work, holding multiple director positions, that I was terminated, I feel unwarranted and without cause. So I'm seeking some legal remedies for that activity. So, but other than that unfortunate minor blemish that I hope to correct in the near future, I have a clean record.
Okay, that concludes this round of questioning. Commissioners, board members, it's now time to ask any other questions you might have. Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you. We've talked a little bit, and I know you've heard some feedback about getting projects out of the ground.
Yeah.
So even getting that first step, you had mentioned that you usually finish projects on time. Very commendable. In construction, it's very difficult to finish under budget and on time. So can you tell us about some of the skills that you employ to try to achieve those goals?
Again, I don't claim to be a technical expert when it comes to engineering or other aspects or project management. But I think ongoing communication, whoever's on your team, understanding what those deadlines are as far as expenditures, what the community expects, to me is, so it's ongoing communication with everybody involved in the process. And I think, one of the great things of the CRA director also being a city staff member is that you have that relationship with the individuals that kind of control your destiny, which is the planning department, engineering department, permitting. So I think you have the ability to be able to kind of help streamline that process when you're managing projects. But again, I think just ongoing communication and just push as hard as you can because you want to meet deadlines. So.
Madam President.
Thank you. What can you share with us that would demonstrate your knowledge of our CRA districts, our community, or our CRA projects?
Yeah. So, in talking to the community, I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job in the downtown area. And I think we've all discussed that there's, we want to focus on sustainable growth, trying to kind of keep City of West Palm Beach as a sense of place, in the nation. So I think doubling down on certain aspects of the events, what you guys do in the community. I know there's multiple events that I participated in the past on the 500 block, which I think are great experiences where you shut the block down and you create an area where people can come and have a good time. But in listening to the community, I realized that there's some major frustrations as it relates to projects in the Northwood area that have been promised for years and haven't come to completion yet. So namely the anchor site. I've heard multiple residents talk about the Sunset Lounge and Jazz Park. And I think there's the ability to be able to kind of make sure we push those projects that are on the shelf, that are under construction, to completion, so you can show other parts of the community that these CRA funds are here to work for you also.
Mr. Neary?
Thank you. You had an opportunity yesterday to interact with the public, I believe, on 2 occasions. And I think we understand how important communication is to this position. Specifically, whether it's a polarizing project or not, talk about your style in terms of communication to the greater public, not necessarily staff or the team, but as the executive director, possibly the lead of the organization. Sometimes you're communicating information that the community needs to hear, but that could be met with resistance or gratification. But can you just talk about your communication style?
So, my policy is always having an open door and giving my personal cell phone number, especially to residents. I think that sometimes the issue is that you can't always solve all their issues. And I think sometimes there's some misconceptions that relates to how CRA funds can be used, and where's the pot of money and how are they being a part of the pie and so forth. So I think education, but listening to residents at the ground level that have been here for years, that have historical knowledge. So the way I approach is that I treat everybody hopefully the same as from a developer that's trying to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal to a resident that has some issue regards to code enforcement or crime. So I think the key part is that keeping that communication line open between the CRA board director, be approachable. I don't want to live on an island. I'm a city staff person. At the end of the day, I work for them. They pay taxes, and so I am their employee at the end of the day. So I think from a resident standpoint or from a community member standpoint, just open communication.
I do have a question, and if you alluded to it earlier about the Sunset Lounge. Don't know how much you know about it, but the city has bought it, and the CRA has bought the property. We've in the process of renovating it. So the question that will come before us is now, what do we do with it from a management and operations standpoint? Do you have any thoughts as to suggested course of action?
In my research, online, as raised at the city of West Palm Beach, that came up multiple times. I think doubling down on the city's unique cultural tourism is going to be a key aspect. So making that a key part of the area to be able to grow off of, so if it's events, if it's, creating a small business around it. So I think, again, just doubling down on what works and tapping into that historic nature of the city and engaging the residents in that process. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. I know you briefly addressed the ongoing litigation against the town of Davie, and I'm not going to ask you any specifics about that, but I just wanted to make sure that I have the full picture. Have you ever been involved in any other litigation against any other employer other than Davie?
So I worked for Davie for 15 years. My only job prior to that was when I was finishing my undergrad work at the city of Deerfield Beach. So I spent most of my tenure in the town of Davie. So I've had no other litigations with any other municipalities other than Davie.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rouse.
Yeah, I want to kind of double back down on the mayor's question to you regarding the Sunset Lounge. West Palm Beach is a city, and the CRA is a board that is here to address blight and the like. We're not club operators or restaurateurs. What, if any, suggestions would you have in the operation of the Sunset Lounge venue?
Again, I think we've had multiple discussions about engaging the community. So I think that's key. So engaging the historical people that have been involved in that before, that have full knowledge of where it came from and what they want to see. But I think at some point, maybe we procure someone that has done this from a national standpoint to be able to, again, double down on making it a tourist attraction. But again, being sensitive to the residents that know it belongs to them. So I think there won't be anybody in the city staff that probably has the skill set, but I think going out for a specialist to be able to manage that process and help make it a national appeal will probably be a good approach.
Commissioner Shove.
Thank you. As part of the reporting to this board, we have an advisory board, the CRA Advisory Board. Can you tell us what your vision would be of that board's involvement, how you would be involved with them, and how you would present that to this board?
Again, I think the first 30, 60, 90 days assessing, what's going on in the community, what are the needs and so forth. But I think with advisory boards, they could be a great asset or they can be an obstacle. I think sometimes creating strategic plans and deliverable items for the board to be able to assist moving forward might be a good approach. But again, my initial response is to be able to just learn, discuss with the board members, get to know them and see what their vision is based on being your appointees. But again, I think at the end of the day, providing some very structured ways they can assist us to be able to move the work of the CRA forward.
On a related front is your strategy for getting to know the communities that the CRA serves. How do you propose to do that?
Well, I think the most important thing is, like I mentioned to most of you during our interviews, that I had monthly meetings in communities inside my previous community where we addressed real issues, the crime issues, code enforcement. You have to go where they're at. So you have to go to where they're drinking coffee, you have to visit their church on a Sunday, you have to go to their community events. So I'm gonna make myself fully available to be engaged in their communities would be my plan.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner.
More question. Thank you. Based on your research in the last 2 days, what are you sensing as probably your biggest learning curves regarding if you were offered this position? What would you say are kind of the biggest challenge for you personally?
I think assessing, where the project activities are, and to me to kind of get grounded as far as where they're at in the process, what have been the obstacles in the past, and how can I be able to push them forward to completion would be probably the biggest learning curve. But also understanding the community's frustrations. I think, we had an open forum yesterday with community members, and it was like speed dating, going back and forth. So kind of understanding what their issues are there things that the CRA can handle or not? If not, can we bring in all the resources to be able to assist them in managing those issues? So I think just really assessing where the CRA stands as far as project and activities. But I think it's super important that, we re-engage the community as a CRA so they feel that they're part of the process.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? We do have a little bit of time if you'd like to, first of all, do you have any questions for us?
No, like I mentioned, I think multiple commission members. I mean, hope you get to a point in your career where you're interviewing on both sides. You guys are looking at me as a possible candidate, but I'm also, during those interviews we had, I wanted to see what was the vision of the board moving forward. Am I walking into any major issues that I need to clean up, or is there any toxic type environment that that might need to avoid? I didn't see that. I think there's a great passion collectively from the elected body to the community to be able to want to move forward. So to me, it seems to be an exciting situation. So I hope that it's a good match between the City of West Palm Beach CRA and Giovanni Moss.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That concludes this part of the process, and I'll get back to you.
Hey, thank you again.
Thank you. we go.
Members of the board, this is your fifth and final candidate, Mr. Jeffrey Orris. By way of experience, he is currently the municipal government consultant for place planning and design. Prior, served as the economic development director for the city of Miami Beach, and prior as the president and owner of Planning and Redevelopment Consultants in Coconut Creek. Members of the board, Mr. Orris.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Orris, for your interest in this position. We are not having opening statements, and we're going to dive right into the questions, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Commissioner Nearing?
Thank you.
You have the first one.
All right, good day, Mr. Orris.
Good day, sir.
How has your background and experience prepared you to be successful in the position of Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency?
Well, I've had quite a varied experience through a number of different communities with CRAs, both through consulting and as staff to those agencies. I have probably worked with about 28 to 30 CRAs across the state. As a former president of the Florida Redevelopment Association and one of their lead trainers for their redevelopment certification program, I certainly have a little bit more experience than most and great knowledge in Chapter 163, Part 3, the governing legislation of CRAs. In fact, I have been in the halls of the legislature numerous times lobbying for language that's in that statute. There is actually a few words in there that I wrote along the way. I have been involved in numerous different projects ranging from, hey, let's plant a tree here, to working with the team redeveloping the Miami Beach Convention Center. So I've got quite the gamut of projects. I've worked in a number of communities of varying ethnicities and different backgrounds and income levels, and have always been able to get along with whoever is there and relate to what their issues are and what's happening. Certainly, this is a very diverse community. I have worked in that diversity. Particularly, I would like to point out in Martin County, their 7 CRA districts, which I oversaw as Community Development Director, are all radically different in their composition, but they are all, for the most part, lower income communities that needed some assistance along the way. And we're actually comprised of mostly areas that at one time had been incorporated and after post-storms in the 1930s were unincorporated and then added to the cities, so they had their own little downtowns over time. All of that experience leads me to West Palm Beach, where all of that can come into play. You have large projects, you have small projects, you have your downtown power brokers, you have some of your ethnic communities that certainly are a part of the CRA and an important part of it.
Very good. Commissioner Baduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And for the second question, describe your background in budget preparation and administration, specifically in short and long-term budget planning.
Certainly, as the Executive Director of the Margate CRA and with Martin County as the Community Development Director there, the CRA wrote the CRA's budget solely by myself. In Martin County, I prepared the budget and then worked with the county's budget officer to finalize the budget. I sat there and worked all estimates for particular projects that needed to be budgeted. I put together the entire of the budget for my department or for the CRA in Margate. I also worked on my division budget in Miami Beach. It was not as extensive in design as the other two. In Margate, I was also responsible for planning out all the long-term projects. Every project the board wanted to do was plugged into a long-term plan to figure out exactly where it could be. Now, not within those types of budgets, but one of the things that I also had been responsible for, as a consultant, I wrote a number of redevelopment plans. Those plans all had a long-term 30-year illustrative budget put in, which included every project outlined in the plan, along with an estimate of cost and a timeline within it. That was done to meet state statute that says your plan must be doable. Essentially, it says you must prove that your plan is a doable plan. So we wrote these long-term budgets to show that the costs of all of these projects could be done over the lifespan of those CRAs that we were creating, and I've probably done that for about 6 or 7 different plans.
Commissioner Ross.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Describe to us the most impactful redevelopment project you've been involved in.
It was probably the creation of, and some of you heard me say this yesterday, the redevelopment strategy for the North Beach area of Miami Beach. Not because a lot has come out of it yet, but because it brought the community together to an extent that that city had never seen before. And it brought different communities within the city together, particularly the historic preservation community and the development community, to a common goal to have a plan that went forward to the commission and was unanimously approved. In addition, one of the things that I'm very proud of with that plan, one of the reasons why I find it one of the most impactful, was we had a number of public meetings leading up to the creation of that plan. The plan was presented to the public before being presented to the commission for approval. We did it in a movie theater that had 350 seats, of which approximately 320 were filled with residents. One person got up to try to poke holes in the plan. The consultant, Dover Cole was our consultant on that, I know you're familiar with them, and myself stood on a stage and said nothing because the public defended the plan. We did not have to respond to that person. The public did all the responding. This particular person came up and said, well, this isn't addressed. Somebody stood up and said, that's on page 84, what are you talking about? Another couple of items like that came up, and the public pointed that person in the direction of where they were, and they defended the plan. That was truly an incredible situation for a governmental project of that type. And I could not be prouder of having brought the community in, brought them together, all aspects of the community onto a project like that.
Very good. Commissioner Shove.
Can you please explain your experience in working in culturally and economically diverse groups and how you would build consensus amongst stakeholders to achieve an agency goal?
Certainly, as I mentioned before, I think Martin County is my best example there. There are a number of different communities we worked with in Martin County. You had one historically Caribbean American community, one historically African American community. I had a large Guatemalan population in Indiantown. And in all aspects, it really is a matter of going out into the community, making sure you're being seen, talk to all the people who are out there, make sure that everybody has an opportunity to converse with you, to reach you, the door's open, the phone rings. So it's making sure that you build the trust within any community that's like there. When you have the diversity, it's still treating no one any different than anybody else, as I would do anywhere in my own personal life. It just fosters trust. The trust is the most important part in working with any type of community like that. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to listen, they're not going to participate, they're not going to believe. So in any of those types of diverse situations, that's the key. In this community, I certainly would make sure that I was out there meeting people, talking to anybody who wants to talk, and probably some who don't want to talk, to make sure that they're aware that they can participate, that this is about being their city. Not my city, their city. So make sure that they're coming out. In this community, again, I would treat it no differently. That's the way that we would move forward.
Describe to us a time when a project you were managing had unforeseen budget or timeline issues. How did you address those challenges?
I inherited a sewer project in Martin County that was being done under a CDBG grant from the state. When I got there, the project was already 2 years behind schedule. We were all set to go out to RFP to find, I'll back it up a little bit. It was a sewer project. One of the problems with it being a sewer project is it had no water component, and these neighborhoods did not have county water service. They were all on wells. This kind of riled up the community because one of the problems we had is how was sewer to be calculated? Usually it's calculated based on the value of your water bill. So they would be charged, it was determined by the utility department, on the average county sewer bill. These were not high-income areas. These were mostly mobile homes and small homes that mostly lower-income folks were living in. This was not acceptable, for them to have a $50 sewer bill and not have water. So we immediately looked and found a budget for water. That took a little bit of time, not much. The CRA had more than enough money over the time to add that into the project. What was really the time buster is we were ready to put the project out to RFP to find an undergrounding utility company that could come out and install those lines. Literally the day before the RFP was to go on the street, the utility department notified me we did not own the rights to serve half the area we were doing the project in. This is not what you expect to hear after a project that's been in the pipeline for 3 years, but it is what we were immediately facing. It was going to cost more money, and it was going to be a hassle to figure out how to get the rights to serve those areas. Ultimately, bringing a team together of the county's stormwater utility and the utilities division, we were able to get to the owners of that small utilities, very small utilities, only serving about 300 homes. And they had rights to the area we were in, but they were not serving it. It was owned by a family. The patriarch had health issues. The family was anxious to sell it. So we were able to work out a deal by cobbling together money from a number of different county departments and come to a realization on a sale within 30 days. The closing didn't happen for 60 days, but part of the initial contract in the 30 days was that we would have right to build this service but not serve it until after the closing. And so we were at the table making sure that happened. Like I said, we cobbled together money between the CRA, the utility, and the city's stormwater department to make that happen. We did get it together within a reasonable amount of time. It didn't significantly impact the timeline of the project, but it did impact the project. It almost had the possibility of killing the project.
Thank you. Madam President.
Thank you. This question has a few different parts to it here. So if you could tell us about a specific time where there was a politically sensitive situation in which you were involved, and we would like to know three things. What made it politically sensitive? What was your role in the situation? And what was the outcome or result?
My employment with the City of Margate CRA became a political issue. The commission in that community was divided, generally along a 3-2 line, and there was one commissioner who came to me one time. The two who did not care for me for whatever reason tried to eliminate my position from the budget. The third one came forward and said, you know, you're just not sucking up to me enough, and put me in a position of having to kowtow to her. This became a large issue during the budget period. They chose to put my position on hold. They funded it, but wanted to revisit it in a few months after. It became a concern for a number of the city's unions, who all saw the changes that were being made by my department. They all supported me. A number of residents from the public came out to support the position, and ultimately they chose just to leave it as it is. But I really didn't enjoy being a political volleyball. It was one of those situations I was in. I'm happy to give you another example that might be more project-oriented if that suits your need.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. Can you describe the process you would utilize in preparing for and developing a staff recommendation on highly controversial community redevelopment issues that generate community and stakeholder interest on all sides?
Well, certainly one of the most important things is finding out what the community wants. If we don't have consensus that the community wants it, then we certainly have an issue there to work with. It is also, of course, what you all are looking to have and what your priorities are and whether you want the project to move forward. Mixing that with the community's consensus on it. We would look at those items as well as looking at the cost of the item and doing an appropriate economic analysis of the project. One of the things is, does this make sense to do? I'm dealing that today with some projects I'm on. Does it make sense? Are we going to get a return on this? Look at it from that business aspect of what's the return on the investment. Now, we're a public entity, so the return on investment dollars-wise is not always the most important thing. So sometimes we have to do that list of what are those benefits to the community and livability of the community. We'd certainly look at that as well. Be putting all that information together, determining support, non-support, dollar return as well as livability return, and make our recommendation from there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Patuzzi.
Thank you. Other than relying on industry associations, for example, Florida Redevelopment Association or ICSC, how do you stay informed on cutting-edge redevelopment activities and industry trends?
Well, most of the things that I keep myself informed with are just my network of friends and colleagues. I have people that I talk to regularly that are involved in real estate, commercial leasing, and I follow those trends as well as read a number of different journals along the way. Governing Magazine, Florida Trend's always a good one to give you the most recent of what's happening in the state. Also following legislation and what's coming down the pike through Tallahassee is always important too, to be prepared for that. Then it's also keeping abreast of demographics and other numbers of the area to know what's happening see what your numbers are. There are certain businesses that will or will not locate based on the demographics of an area. So if you know your demographics, you're going to be able to talk to businesses and tell them what kind of workforce is available, what kind of disposable income is in the area, what kind of housing and schooling is available. Those are the important things when people are relocating or when they're locating a business to a particular area. So I would say stay on top of those as well. So it's not just about those associations at all. Those allow access to network to people. And those networks I maintain and are outside of the association, but generally it's making sure that I'm on the demographics and watching the trends based on what people are telling me, what I read in the paper, and other different journals.
Commissioner Wells.
What is your most often used management style? And could you provide examples that explain your style?
It's pretty much walking around and making sure my hands touch things. I like to make sure that the folks I'm supervising are on track with things. I like to give them as much opportunity to do it all on their own as they can. If I have to oversee every little project, then I've done a poor job of supervising them. But I do like to get out. I do like to see people. I like to touch things. One of the things I always talk about is when I've done redevelopment plans in the past, the number one activity I do is I go out and walk the entire district and take photographs. I have places where I've taken over 3,000 photographs because I want to know every little nook and cranny so that anybody who has any project, I can talk to it. I've seen it, I've been there, I know what they're talking about. The people that I supervise, I want them to have that same sort of understanding so that no resident comes forward and brings up a situation of which we're not aware, or we don't at least know the location and can have the picture in my mind the minute they bring it up. So it really is kind of a hands-on, making sure that I know what's going on, making sure that my people know what's going on, and that we're all on the same page.
Commissioner Schoaf.
How do you balance the duties of CRA Executive Director position, given that the position is a city employee reporting to the CRA board, but all of the CRA staff are contractors?
That's certainly going to be a unique one in this city. One of the things that I think would certainly help me in this situation is that I have familiarity with the folks who own that company. Chris Brown and Kim Meister are long-term friends of mine through the network of the Redevelopment Association. I've known them both for 20 years. I don't feel that if I had any problems with the staff here that I wouldn't be able to address it with them immediately in an appropriate manner. I don't think it's a terrible situation to have. Of course, I would prefer that there be people working directly for me, but I think it's really that relationship with the company and whether you can directly go to them and say, hey, these people aren't working out. We need to change this staff out. And identifying those folks that maybe just don't have the capability at the moment, but can be trained, and working with them to make sure those people get the appropriate skills to stay in the position. Certainly not everybody, just because they're not working on a project right, should be out the door. Some of them should be afforded the opportunity to find the skills that are really necessary, be given the guidance that's appropriate. And again, it's all about the relationship with the company and whether that's an ongoing, and I wouldn't expect any bumps in the road with them at all.
Tell us about a specific time when you had to handle a tough problem which involved ethical issues on which you felt your integrity was tested.
One of the communities I worked in had a commissioner that did not want a certain project to move forward, and he encouraged me to delay it continuously. Now, certainly at the request of a commissioner and he has questions, I will delay a project to get those answers. But when I got onto the second and the third request for delay, then I needed to go talk to my boss, the administrator of that particular government, let him know exactly what was going on, because this was beyond the norm. And I certainly had to sit back and make sure that I was ready to incur the wrath of that particular elected official. It was very difficult for me in trying to figure out when I pulled the trigger on whether it's a reasonable request because a commissioner requires more information, or whether they've stepped over the line and made it personal or a little too effective from themselves. Ultimately, I did not hold back any further after a slight delay on a second request, and then moved forward with it and had a conversation with that elected official and just let them know it's not within my job to hold that back.
Okay, Madam President.
Thank you. Are there any ethical issues in your background that we should be aware of? And is there anything you would like to share with us that you believe requires further explanation?
Absolutely nothing. As I have mentioned to several of you before, if you do a background check on me, you're probably going to find a fairly boring person. I have never been arrested. I have not been involved in anything overly controversial, except for there is a little bit of stuff that you find on me related to the Kelo decision, Supreme Court decision on eminent domain a couple of years ago. Because at the time that decision came out, I was the president of the Florida Redevelopment Association. Some op-ed pieces were written by the association that went out with my name on them. And if you search them, you find some people who responded to them that said some fairly crazy things. It was not the op-ed itself. It was nothing that I did. It was nothing that you'll find controversial from my end of it. But you'll find some interesting things some other people said. And interesting names they called me, too.
Board members, that concludes this portion of the questioning, and I open it up for any other questions you might have. There's a question that I want to ask, and I presume doing your research, you've heard about this project, the Sunset Lounge that we have in
Yes, sir.
one of our communities. It's a building that has significant historical significance, so the CRA bought it. We're in the process of renovating it. And at some point, we as a board will have to decide what to do with respect to management, operation, et cetera. I was just wondering if you had any ideas on best practices and any suggestions for how we should proceed.
Best practices, certainly during my time in Miami Beach, I was in the Office of Tourism, Culture, and Economic Development. That office actually monitored and oversaw the contracts for the Jackie Gleason Theater at the Fillmore, as well as events at the Convention Center. I think they had it right in essentially contracting out the management of the facility. One of the things I often say is there are things that cities do really well because we do them every day. This would be one of those examples of where we don't do that every day. And it would probably be best to find the professionals who do that, who know how to manage, who know how to book acts, if you want to go ahead with that and do that sort of thing. And I would certainly recommend that that's the avenue you take. You do an RFP for somebody who can do that. Find somebody who has plenty of good experience with a similar size facility and with the type of events or things that you want out there, and proceed that way.
Any other questions? Commissioner Schoaf?
Thank you. As part of my process, I go through and Google candidates' names, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to a newspaper article from a number of years ago about your time at the City of Margate, where it indicated at the time where the CRA board decided to go from using a citizen-elected board to a politician board, that you opted to resign as you preferred to work with a professional board instead of politicians.
Yes.
Would you care to respond to that?
Oh, I can certainly. That was the incident part of the incident I was talking about before. And what it was is those elected officials that had that 3-2 division on the commission flipped to the folks who are not supporters of mine at all. They had not supported any effort of the CRA to date. And so I saw it in my best interest to leave rather than sit there and try to work for folks who I didn't see eye to eye with. It was nothing about the board becoming the elected officials. It was all about those particular individuals, what they had stated in the past, the projects that they supported and didn't support. I have always prided myself on seeing the writing on the wall and leaving before things got ugly. And I did not see that going in a positive direction and thought it in my best interest to move on.
Commissioner Rouse?
In doing your research for this job, what, if anything, have you identified as a particular need for our CRA?
I think the particular need really is for there to be a good outreach to those communities in the North and the Northwest that clearly don't have the trust of the CRA that makes it easy to move forward with projects there. I heard a number of that from residents yesterday. I heard some of that in discussions with each of you yesterday. And certainly that seems like the thing that jumped out at me right away is that there's just a little bit of trust that's not there. And I think that's one of the most important things you really can't move forward with any project in those areas unless we can gain that trust in full.
Commissioner Neary?
Thank you. So along those same lines, you talked about the 2 meetings that you had yesterday with community members, and you talked about building trust. what is your communication style, not with the team, not with employees per se, but with the community? How would you, as the executive director, cast that vision and perhaps facilitate some of that communication to the community? Talk a little bit about that.
To me, one of the most important things is getting out there to any community meetings. I mean, I'm not going to go to each and every one of them, but make sure that I'm visible, that people know me, that they feel that I'm approachable, that everybody has my phone number and email and can reach me, and I try to return calls as quickly as possible to make sure that that trust is there. Really just making sure that when people ask questions, they get answers. Whether that be in a community meeting, or they call up, or they email, or they state something on social media, that we get those responses to them right away. I've always never been afraid to go out in meetings. I love telling a story. One time when I first started in Margate, the CRA was new, people didn't know about it. There was a crime watch group, community crime watch group, that had talked to their crime watch officer about, the CRA, what's it about? He suggested they call me. They called me and they said, well, could you send us some information? We're having a meeting tomorrow night. I said, well, what time's your meeting? They said, 7 o'clock. I said, I'll be there. And they're like, no, we just need the information. I said, no, I'll come out. I'll talk about it. I'll answer all your questions. And in that instance where the job was threatened, that neighborhood came out in force and went, we never asked him to come out, and he's always been there for us, and he always answered our questions. When we had concerns, we brought him to Jeff. He told us who to talk to. So that's the type of style that I like, where they see me as a resource, and one that's trusted.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Thank you. My question has been answered by other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Schultz.
Thank you. As part of this process, the CRA has a lower board, the CRA Advisory Board, that advises the CRA board. Can you talk to us about what your vision would be of engaging them and what their role would be under your direction for this board?
Well, I'd certainly like to bring all the major issues before them and use them to be an outreach to the community. One of the things, and I apologize if this offends you all at all, is to make sure that what they're saying is heard by you all. My experience with advisory boards is eventually someone stops listening, and then they start getting very ornery and don't want to participate anymore because they feel that they're not being heard. So I think one of the more important things in getting them involved is to make sure that you understand what they're doing and that you're supporting the efforts that they're doing. Again, I would certainly, it's a touchy one to talk about here, but certainly make sure that you all know what's happening with that board and that you can have input onto where they're going and what you want to see. And we will bring forward things that they're involved with, again, using them as another mouthpiece in the community to promote the things that they feel should be done and bringing back information that we can then share with the board.
Commissioner.
Thank you. So based on your research and the last 2 days of interviews and meeting with community individuals, what would you say is going or would be your biggest learning curve if selected as the CEO?
It would probably
Director,
be staying on top of some of the downtown projects, because most of what we heard was from the neighborhoods. Because we were on such a short leash between when we were informed and now, I did not get the chance to investigate further the litany of projects that are ongoing. And they're big projects, so you certainly got to know what's going on with those. I'm fairly comfortable through my experience in the city in the past, as well as some of the things that happened, that reaching out to the neighborhoods would be fairly easy, and it's straightforward in my world and how I do that. So it really is a little bit more of getting a better understanding of what's happening downtown.
I did have a question to follow up on a response. You mentioned that you would prefer to have employees reporting directly to you, I think. Is it going to be this kind of hybrid structure that we're talking about? Is that going to be a problem? Or are we going to, if you were to get the position, would you come to us in like 2 years and say, now you need to hire 2 or 3 people to supplement your staff? Go ahead.
Because of my relationship with the folks at RMA, I don't think it'll be a problem at all. And certainly, it would be a consistent evaluation on my part on what's best for the CRA and the city. And if I felt at any time it wasn't good, I would certainly bring forward a recommendation that we review it and possibly change it. But it's certainly not something I'm anticipating right out of the box. I expect it to be no problem.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we do have a few minutes. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, it's one of the questions I asked as we all interviewed in one-on-one is, I really want to know the scope of what you all expect out of your CRA, where you want it to go, and whether you see any shifts from the projects that you've been doing to something different.
Any board members want to? Yeah, Commissioner Shove.
Speaking from a primarily Northwood Pleasant City CRA perspective, I think we have a number of great projects that haven't gotten to the development phase. And those are projects that the community has been keenly involved with. The anchor site, Curry Park, Arts on Broadway, all projects that could be moved forward. So what I want is that timeline to be shortened, and I'm pretty close to getting what I want. But really, that's what my goals of the CRA, in both CRAs, we have some good things in the pipeline. We've had some good planning that's gone on, capital planning over time. It's the execution and the timely execution.
Anybody else want to jump in? Commissioner Neering.
I would just add, full transparency. I think we're hiring an expert, and we want to hear that. Obviously, we know as the policymakers that ultimately that we'd be voting on the issue, but having all the information, I think, is vital. And, that goes without saying, but I don't think I can be overstated about that. I think it's just so important. And so making sure that we have the person in place who will feel, it's my term, but liberated in making sure that all of the commissioners and the administration has all the information that they're operating from. So
I think one thing I'm looking for is someone who could be a good face of the CRA to the community, and someone who is willing to get out and about and interface with the different constituents of the different CRAs, to be a sounding board to hear and certainly bring that information back to us. Also, in my capacity as mayor, it's important that the CRA Executive Director work well with other senior staff in the city, so that there's coordination, communication, as opposed to sitting in a silo under just the CRA tent and not really working well with others in the sandbox, because I think it'll make for a more efficient, productive operation. Anything else? Yes.
And I would just say, a vision setter. I think, when we talk about communicating, there's one thing with the internal communication, but the communication with the community, I think, is critically important. And having someone who understands that, that might happen in bite-sized opportunities. It may happen in a full auditorium. I mean, there are different ways to do it, but it can't necessarily just happen Monday through Friday from 8 till 5. I mean, it have to be unique ways that this information gets out into the community, and really a leader that can set that vision and stick to it, so that there's just not this honeymoon period where, the first 6 or 8 months, it's all communication, and then that kind of dwindles. So someone who really sees communication as a high priority in this position.
Did that answer some of that question?
I think that gave me a good idea of what you're looking for.
Okay. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make? We have some time, so.
All I'd like to say is certainly I appreciate you considering me for this. I don't envy your decision. You have some excellent candidates here. We all had a nice time back in the other room. I certainly feel that I could contribute to this community and help you move forward into new and exciting new places. That a lot of what we're talking about are things that I'm comfortable with. I would hope that you're comfortable with me on, and certainly look forward to your decision.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the time. I appreciate your consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you for your consideration of the position. that ends this process. And Ms. Johnson, before we break for lunch, you'll give us further direction and instructions.
Yes. What we would like to get from the board is how you prefer to move forward. We do have lunch that we will bring over on this side.
So you got what?
We do have lunch.
Music to my ears.
So at your pleasure, you can break to have lunch, or you want to power through lunch. The candidates will be on the other side. We can leave them over there while you all deliberate. We can invite them back into the room. I'm looking for you all to tell me how you prefer to proceed.
In my humble opinion, I think it would be appropriate to have lunch now. We'll take a little time to eat, and then after that, we could come back and deliberate. Yeah, Commissioner Neary?
And I agree with you, Mayor, but there was a second part to that I want to make sure that I thought I heard, and that's whether or not that the deliberation is happening in concert with the 5 individuals who've applied. I don't want to make that up. Was that, you were asking a question, but I want to make sure I understand your question.
My question was whether or not you all wanted us to leave the candidates in the Flagler Gallery while you deliberated, or do you want us to invite them back into the chamber?
Sure.
Why don't we leave them? My suggestion is just leave them over there. Let us deliberate, but I'm just one of 6, so.
I would agree.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna let the candidates go and have lunch as well, while the board has lunch, and you all will recess and then reconvene?
We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock, or do you want to do it 1:30? Well, we've noticed it for 2 o'clock though, right?
I don't know that
Yeah, I
we
think it's
noticed it for a specific time.
4-2, hopefully.
The only time on your agenda is you began at 8:15. You'll conclude when you're concluded, so you can say what your
Well, I
line
don't
of break
think we
will
need
be.
2 hours to eat lunch.
Right.
Unless the food is that good. Anyway, so do we want to reconvene, what, 1:30, or
1:30 is fine.
is 1:30 fine?
1:15. Oh, that's an hour.
Okay, 1:15, 1:15 we'll reconvene. Does that work for everyone, 1:15? Okay, very good. Before we do adjourn, because otherwise I'll forget it, I want to compliment you, Ms. Johnson, and Human Resources for what I think has been a very professional, a very good process. It's been professional, it's been transparent, there's been opportunities for the community to weigh in. I just want to compliment you all for how you've put this together, and I'm very impressed with the finalists, the quality of the finalists that have come before us. This is not going to be an easy decision.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Sho.
Thank you. And I was going to hold these comments until we reconvene, but it's topical. And I think it's been a very organized process the whole way through. If I may offer just a bit of constructive comments. The CRA Advisory Board was not engaged in this, and I think they're an integral part. They engaged on their own, and perhaps it was on me, and I accept that responsibility if it was me that should have brought it forward to get them engaged. If we would do a similar process that involved anything with the CRA, I would ask that the CRA board be advised. And again, echo my comments at the beginning. I appreciate the meet and greet for citizen input. I think it was a little more difficult for them to have input on the record or even to access commissioners to relay that feedback. I know I've been on the phone all morning and receiving texts and emails all morning, kind of getting that feedback. So if we could formalize that process going forward. Other than that, I do appreciate that you have been prompt, on schedule, organized, and I think provided some really great resumes. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Anything else? Okay. So we have to wait for you to bring the food over, right?
The lunch is in the bag.
Oh, it's already there?
Yes, and don't wait for me to bring it out to you.
I thought it was still in Flagler Gallery. Okay.